Chapter 515. When they returned to their temporary residence, Yili asked curiously, "Which tribe does Princess Anshi's husband belong to?" "You and my brother both know their language." Mo Xiaoyao nodded. "It's a tribe called the White Wolf tribe in the southwest of Nanjiang. They live deep in the mountains and have been living with ferocious beasts and poisonous insects since childhood. Almost all the men in the clan were the best hunters and archers in the world. Besides, they are as good at controlling poisonous insects as the other Nanjiang people, maybe even better. When we were preparing to pacify Nanjiang, I had people investigate them and found that some of the soldiers had learned this language. I only learned it because I had nothing better to do." Yili sat down and poured tea for herself while thinking. Princess Anshi chose this time to get married because she wants the support of the White Wolf tribe. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and sat down opposite Yili. Before they came to Nanjiang, they had sent people to investigate Princess Anshi's marriage. Mo Xiaoyao said, "The current situation in Nanjiang is very unfavorable for Princess Anshi. Princess Anshi needs the support of other tribes in Nanjiang. It was better when Big Brother was in the south, but he has been busy in the northwest these years. Princess Anshi has to deal with her father, Shu Manlin, Tan Jiji, and the leaders of the tribes by herself. I'm afraid it's not easy." Then Yili frowned and said worriedly. Although they should help Princess Anshi based on their friendship with her, they didn't want to help her. However, in terms of the stability between countries, a chaotic southern border was the most beneficial to them. "Let's try not to get involved." Su Qingchen's voice came from outside the door. Young Master Qingchen, who had regained his elegance and gentleness, walked in. When he saw Mo Xiaoyao, he narrowed his eyes. He looked at Yili and said, "My friendship with Princess Anshi is one thing, but getting involved in the internal affairs of other countries is another. In the past, I was just a friend of Princess Anshi, but now our words and deeds represent the Northwest. Therefore, we cannot make any mistakes." Yili nodded and asked worriedly, "Will it make things difficult for Big Brother?" Su Qingchen shook his head. "Princess Anshi knows her limits." Yili thought for a moment and said, "To be honest, Princess Anshi may be talented in governing a country, but in terms of scheming, I'm afraid Princess Anshi is no match for those people. If we stand by and do nothing, once Princess Anshi is defeated and southern Jiang falls into Shu Manlin's hands, it won't be good for the Northwest." Su Qingchen fell silent for a moment and said, "I'll talk to Princess Anshi later. We can help them in secret, but we can't stand on either side openly. The affairs of Nanjiang have nothing to do with us." Yili nodded and said, "I understand." Looking at Su Qingchen's calm and graceful manner, Yili sighed in her heart. Sometimes, her brother was so rational that it was heartless. Perhaps in his heart, Princess Anshi was not as important as his family, even though she was his friend. After all, the Northwest was their home. After all, they were guests from afar. The next morning, Yi Li and the others went to the palace to see the king of Nanzhao. As before, Princess Anshi personally accompanied him to the palace. After yesterday's meeting and conversation, Puwa was much more familiar and friendly when he saw them again. The young man also greeted them in the language he was used to. Even though she had been to Nanzhao before, this was the first time Yi Li had seen the king of Nanzhao. The king of Nanzhao wore a robe made of brocade and embroidery unique to Nanzhao. His entire person was resplendent. On his head was a magnificent crown made of gold and inlaid with emeralds and jade. His entire person was so dazzling that it was almost blinding. The entire palace was filled with a magnificent style that was completely different from the central plains. Prince Ding and Princess Ding have come from afar. I don't welcome them. Did Prince Ding and Princess rest well last night? The king of Nanzhao sat on the throne and laughed heartily. But there was no welcome in Mo Xiaoyao's eyes. The king of Nanzhao's Central Plains language was very good, but he had a slight Nanzhao accent. This was a problem that many Nanzhao people had, but it did not affect the listener's understanding. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and raised his hands in return. He said, "The crown princess's wedding is near. I and Princess Consort congratulate the king and princess of Nanzhao." We also wish that the king of Nanzhao will have a grandson soon. The king of Nanzhao's expression froze. Even though there was nothing wrong with Mo Xiaoyao's congratulatory speech, the king of Nanzhao was not yet 50 years old. Mo Xiaoyao said that he wished him a grandson soon. It sounded normal, but in the king of Nanzhao's ears, it seemed to be mocking him for not being able to have a son. Even His Highness Prince Ding has come from afar. The crown princess really has a lot of face. I really envy her. The atmosphere in hall I was subtly stiff. Suddenly, a seductive female voice came from the side hall. Everyone looked to the side. Xu Manlin was dressed in the gorgeous yellow robes of the Saintess of Nanjiang. But she did not wear the mask that the Saintess of Nanjiang wore to receive outsiders. The other Nanzhao people in the hall seemed to be used to this. Mo Xiaoyao's gaze slowly swept across Xu Manlin. He frowned and said in confusion, "King of Nanzhao, this is?" The king of Nanzhao laughed and looked lovingly at Xu Manlin. He said, "Prince Ding does not know. This is the saintess of my Nanzhao kingdom, Xu Manlin." Mo Xiaoyao's frown deepened. He said coolly, "I heard that the saintess of Nanjiang cannot be more than 25 years old and never sees outsiders. So this is just a rumor?" A trace of anger flashed across Xu Manlin's face. Was Mo Xiaoyao saying that she looked more than 25 years old? But Xu Manlin had been locked up by Mo Xiaoyao for more than half a year. She still had some lingering fear of him. Even in front of so many people, she did not want to take the initiative to provoke him. She could only look pitifully at the king of Nanzhao. At least on the surface, the king of Nanzhao did treat Xu Manlin much better than Princess Anqi, who was the princess and the crown princess. Seeing Xu Manlin's pleading eyes, the king of Nanzhao immediately helped her out. "Prince Ding does not know. The saintess is the great savior of Nanzhao. So after discussion among the chiefs of the tribes, the saintess Xu Manlin will become the saintess of Nanzhao for life." Yili glanced at Xu Manlin's slightly proud face and smiled in her heart. She did not know if Xu Manlin was the savior of Nanzhao. But based on her relationship with Tan Jiji, she looked more like the bane of Nanzhao. To be able to persuade so many chiefs of the tribes of Nanzhao to agree that Xu Manlin did not have to abide by the rules of Nanjiang for hundreds of years, it was clear that their power in Nanjiang was not to be underestimated. It was no wonder that Princess Anqi chose to marry Pu'er at this time. Pu'er's tribe was also a very powerful tribe in Nanjiang. Coupled with the support of Princess Anqi's grandfather's tribe, they could barely compete with Xu Manlin and Tan Jiji. Mo Xiaoyao nodded indifferently. A trace of anger flashed across Xu Manlin's eyes. She turned and looked at Su Qingchen. After a slight pause, Xu Manlin stepped forward and smiled softly. "Is this the first young master of Dechu State, young master Qingchen? It's a pleasure to meet you. Xu Manlin greets you." Princess Anqi looked at her indifferently and sneered. "It's not your first time seeing Qingchen. Why are you so pretentious?" This woman had trapped Qingchen in the underground palace of Nanzhao for many days. Now she was pretending to be meeting him for the first time. How evil! Xu Manlin looked at Princess Anqi and blinked innocently. "Your Highness, what do you mean? When did I meet young Master Qingchen?" "But you..." "I heard that Princess Anqi and young Master Qingchen are very good friends." Xu Manlin emphasized the word "very good." It seemed to be full of jealousy and resentment, but it also seemed to be intentional. Because she was speaking in the language of Nanzhao, she deliberately glanced at Pu'er, who was standing beside Princess Anqi. It was even more intentional. Princess Anqi's eyes flashed with a sharp light. She looked at Xu Manlin coldly and said, "So what if I'm friends with young Master Qingchen? I'm the crown princess of Nanzhao. Can't I even make friends with one person?" But someone has been fooling around with King Li of Dechu State for many years. At that time, someone hadn't received the privileges of the tribes of Nanjiang yet, right? No matter how bold Xu Manlin was, she couldn't help but blush when Princess Anqi said that in front of so many people. "You!" Princess Anqi smiled disdainfully. "What? Holy maiden, are you saying that you don't know King Li of Dechu State? Princess Anqi dared to ask this because she had evidence that Xu Manlin had known Mo Jingli for a long time. Xu Manlin couldn't deny or admit it. If she denied it, Princess Anqi might throw out the evidence of her relationship with Prince Li in a fit of anger. If she admitted it, it would be worse. Although she was no longer restricted by these restrictions, it would be very disadvantageous for her if people found out that she had been acquainted with a man outside for years. That's enough, Why are you saying this in front of the guests? The king of Nanzhao suddenly spoke. He frowned and looked at Princess Anqi. There was a hint of reprimand in his tone. Princess Anqi was startled and finally lowered her head sadly. Yi Li smiled at the smug look that flashed across Xu Manlin's face. She suddenly pursed her lips and said with a smile, speaking of which, I also feel that the holy maiden looks familiar. Xu Manlin looked at Yi Li in surprise. Her eyes were filled with nervousness and reproach. She seemed to be blaming Yi Li for betraying her. Yi Li smiled faintly. She thought seriously and said, maybe I was mistaken. 5 years ago, when Quan Er was 1 month old, I seemed to have seen a girl who looked very similar to the holy maiden follow a man to the northwest to play. But that man wasn't King Li of Dechu State. This consort must have misjudged him. Yi Li's words scared Xu Manlin. She knew that she had been tricked by Yi Li. She was furious but didn't dare to show it in front of everyone. She could only swallow her anger and say with a forced smile, it's good that you recognized her. My daughter has never been to the northwest. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, what? I've also never seen two people who look so alike. Holy Maiden, please don't blame me. Chapter 516. Mo Xiaoyao's group was the first group of people to come to the wedding because they had the intention of having fun in the south this time. But there was nothing to have fun in Nanzhao Imperial City other than the frequent interactions between the different races. Mo Xiaoyao saw that there were still a few days until Princess Anqi's wedding, so he took Yi Li to other places in Nanzhao to have fun. Because Mo Xiaoyao had the intention of throwing away the other eyesores and only taking Yi Li to have fun, before the third watch, he took Yi Li out of the post house and out of the city. With Mo Xiaoyao's martial arts, no one would be able to detect him if he wanted to avoid someone. So when the other people in the post house found that the prince and princess consort were not present, they only saw a note on the table that said, return in a few days, do not miss. Then they understood that the prince had taken princess consort to travel. Unable to find the two, the people could only wait in the city. With the prince and princess consort's abilities, there was probably no one in Nanjiang that could make things difficult for them. On the other hand, after Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li left Nanzhao Royal City, they did not have a purpose and were just wandering around. They saw beautiful scenery and stayed to enjoy it. It was a rare moment of leisure in the past few years. One day, the two caught 2 wild horses in a forest. In a moment of excitement, they had a horse race. The wild horses they had just caught were not very obedient. Yi Li rode the wild horse and ran wildly through the forest. Mo Xiaoyao's horse riding skills were better and he rode his own horse to follow. When the wild horse finally had enough fun, it listened to Yi Li and slowed down. Mo Xiaoyao rode his horse to catch up from behind. He stared harshly at Yi Li's horse and wanted to tear it to pieces. Although this wild horse had a wild personality, it still had some intelligence. When it sensed Mo Xiaoyao's killing intent, it immediately moved its feet uneasily, but it didn't dare to run around anymore. Yi Li jumped off the horse's back and said with a smile, you don't have to be angry. This horse hasn't been completely tamed yet. If it is so obedient, it will be at a disadvantage. Mo Xiaoyao knew that most BMWs were arrogant, but when it came to Li Li's safety, a BMW was nothing. If it weren't for the fact that he was worried about hurting Mr. Li, he would have cut down the wild horse that was running wildly with his sword. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao's gloomy expression as he stared at the wild horse, Yi Li couldn't help but smile. She pulled Mo Xiaoyao to stop him from looking at the pitiful horse that looked like it wanted to run away but didn't dare to. Looking at the surrounding lush forest and grassland, the ground was also covered with pink, light blue, white, and yellow wildflowers. At a glance, there was no end in sight. It was like a huge green carpet covered with fresh flowers. So beautiful, Xiaoyao, where is this place? Whether it was in the northwest or in the Chu capital, Yili had never seen such a fresh and natural beauty. Mo Xiaoyao looked around and said with a slight frown, "That wild horse has been running for almost 4 hours. Adding on our previous sightseeing, this place should be 500 or 600 li away from Nanzhao Imperial City. This place should be near the sacred land of Nanjiang." Yili was a little surprised. The sacred land of Nanjiang was a mysterious place even to the people of Nanjiang. However, the Prince Ding mansion had the intention of pacifying Nanjiang many years ago and naturally would have investigated it, so it wasn't too surprising. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yili forward and said, "Since we're here, let's go take a look." Yili frowned and said, "Isn't it bad to trespass on the sacred land of Nanjiang?" If the people of Nanzhao knew that Prince Ding and Princess Ding had trespassed on the sacred land of Nanjiang, not only would it affect them negatively, Princess Anqi would also lose face. Mo Xiaoyao said lightly, "If we're not discovered, it's not trespassing. I promised Shenyang to bring back a few stalks of nethernet flower for him." Yili was also very grateful to Shenyang. Not only because he gave up his reputation as a genius doctor and stayed in the Prince Ding mansion for more than 10 years to work on Mo Xiaoyao's poison, but also because Mo Xiaobao was a little weak when he was born. It was all thanks to Shenyang that he was able to grow up to be so lively today. Hearing that it was something Shenyang wanted, Yili was naturally duty-bound. Moreover, she was also very interested in the so-called sacred land of Nanjiang. Mo Xiaoyao obviously had the potential to be a special forces soldier. His sense of direction was so good that even Yili couldn't help but be jealous. Pulling Yili without hesitation, he shuttled through the mountain forest. In less than 2 hours, they arrived at the periphery of the sacred land of Nanjiang. The two nimbly avoided the guards and quickly entered the entrance of the sacred land. Perhaps because it had not been invaded by outsiders for hundreds of years, the guards in the sacred land were not very strict. The two only spent a little effort to sneak in. As soon as they entered, they were greeted by a large blood-red sea of flowers. It was a pure red without any impurities. It almost dyed the entire valley red, looking strange and bloody. "This is..." Yili looked at the fiery red in front of her and frowned. Mo Xiaoyao's expression was calm as he said in a deep voice, "This is the hidden luo flower." Yili sighed and said softly, "When I heard that the hidden luo flower was a sacred item of Nanjiang, I wanted to bring some back to see if it would be useful to you. Fortunately, I didn't waste time." Mo Xiaoyao didn't understand. "Li knows this flower?" Yili said, "There are so many of them. They don't look like rare holy objects, do they? I know that this flower has another name. It's called the red spider lily or the red spider lily. It also has another name, red flower stone garlic." If it wasn't for the blue fallen flower that diverted her attention, Yili might have really entered the sacred land of Nanjiang to look for the hidden luo flower. If at that time she saw that the hidden luo flower was actually the common red flower stone garlic, she would really want to cry. Red spider lily, a Buddhist name, one of the 4 flowers of the heavenly realm. Mo Xiaoyao said. Yili sat beside Mo Xiaoyao casually. After her eyes got used to the blood red that covered the sky, she looked quite good. She laughed softly. "It is indeed a Buddhist name. Legend has it that the red spider lily is the yellow spring flower that grows beside the river of forgetfulness, the only scenery on the road to the yellow spring." Mo Xiaoyao didn't know much about Buddhist scriptures, so he didn't understand, why is it called the red spider lily? Yili recited softly, "The flower blooms without leaves, the leaves without flowers. The red spider lily blooms for 1,000 years, wilts for 1,000 years, the petals and leaves never meet. Love is not cause and effect, fate determines life and death." Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said in a deep voice, "I don't like these words." Yili pursed her lips and looked at him with a faint smile, "I don't like it either. This flower does have some detoxification properties, but it's also poisonous. But it's not considered rare. It's just that right now, other than here, there shouldn't be anyone who would cultivate it on such a large scale. Even if there aren't many in the Jiangnan area, we should be able to find quite a few if we look carefully. Are we going to pick them from here and bring them back to Mr. Shen? Mo Xiaoyao glanced at the large patch of blood red below and said, since we're here, let's take some back. Later, we'll go to Jiangnan to pick some and see if there's any difference. Yi Li nodded indifferently. There were so many in the sacred land of Nanjiang. Not to mention picking a few stalks, even if they pulled out a sack and took it away, no one would notice. Chapter 5:17. After picking a few spider lilies and putting them away, the two continued to walk deeper into the forest. But strangely, it seemed that the deeper they went, the fewer guards there were. As they walked further in, the red flowers that filled the sky seemed to gradually lessen. What entered their eyes was another type of flower. It was a gorgeous ball-shaped flower. There were red, pink, white, blue, and yellow. It was dazzling and made people forget their worries when they saw it. Yi Li's eyes tightened as she stared at the sea of flowers in front of her. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and asked softly, Li, what's wrong? Yi Li raised her head and took out the spider lilies that she had just picked. She pointed at the sea of flowers in front of her and said, Xiaoyao, we must have made a mistake. That should be the hidden luo flower. Mo Xiaoyao was startled. What do you mean? Yi Li said in a low voice, it's best if I'm wrong. If the Nanzhao people only grow these flowers for ornamental purposes, then it's fine. If there are other uses. Mo Xiaoyao asked, is there something wrong with these flowers? Yi Li said softly, these words sound very beautiful, but if they were used on the evil path, the consequences would be unbearable. These flowers can be made into the best painkillers. Mo Xiaoyao didn't understand, isn't that very good? Nowadays, the painkillers used by the various countries were none other than the numbing powder. But the formula was troublesome and the ingredients were not common. On the battlefield, only high-ranking generals could use them. Normal soldiers could only endure the pain and die from the pain. Yi Li shook her head, because if you're not careful, you can become addicted. It's very difficult to quit. If you use it for a long time, you will become weak and wither. Once it's broken, you will go crazy with pain. It can be said to be the best medicine for controlling puppets. It's more effective than any poison. Once this thing spreads, it wouldn't be strange if it could destroy an entire country. Mo Xiaoyao stared at the sea of flowers in front of him, deep in thought. After a while, he looked up at Yi Li and smiled, although I don't know how Li Li knows all this, but I trust Li Li. Let's go inside and take a look. Seeing the white-haired man holding her hand and walking forward, Yi Li's heart skipped a beat. She had never put up her guard in front of Mo Xiaoyao. If it was said that at the beginning, it was said that he was testing her, but later on, he gradually got used to it. She was used to Mo Xiaoyao's seemingly endless tolerance. She had revealed a lot of things that she shouldn't have known, but Mo Xiaoyao had never asked her about them. Sometimes, he would even help her smooth things over. Perhaps, she finally understood why Mo Xiaoyao had always been so uneasy. After turning around the valley, what entered their eyes was still a seemingly boundless sea of flowers. After walking for a long time, they finally saw a magnificent palace at the end of the valley. There's someone here. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li into his arms and hid behind a pile of rocks. Sure enough, not long after, they heard voices coming from afar. That voice was very familiar to Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li. The thing I want, have you prepared it? A cold male voice came from not far away. Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li looked at each other, then looked at the man who was walking over with a few women dressed in southern border clothing. It was Mo Jingli. Standing beside Mo Jingli was the beautiful southern border princess Xixia. These past few years, Mo Jingli had been very good to her. Even though she was a few years older than Yi Ying, she still looked charming and beautiful. Standing in front of them was an old madam in her 50s, holding a sinister-looking snake-headed cane in her hand. Looking at Imo Jingli, she smiled and said, "Prince Li, don't worry. All the doctors in our holy land have worked together for so many years and have finally developed the divine medicine that Prince Li wants. I guarantee that the effects will be better than what Prince Li wants." Imo Jingli said coldly, "Is that so? Then I will wait and see. I hope Elder won't disappoint." The elder smiled confidently and said, "Of course. Since it's a cooperation, we naturally have to satisfy both sides. As long as Prince Li keeps his promise, it's fine. Men, bring the medicine men here." Not long after, a few disheveled people were dragged over. From Imo Xiaoyao and Yi Li's position, they couldn't see them clearly, but they could see a person's figure and appearance. He should be from the Central Plains. That person's eyes were cloudy and unfocused, and his face was sallow and emaciated, as if he had no strength. His expression was sluggish, and his mouth was dripping with saliva. He looked like an idiot born with dementia. The elder smiled and said, "What does Prince Li think? In order to guarantee the efficacy of the medicine, we have specially found a few people from Dechu State to be the medicine men." Imo Jingli carefully observed the medicine men, and seemed very satisfied. He asked, "Not bad, how long have these people been fed the medicine?" The elder smiled and said, "Less than a month." Imo Jingli was even more satisfied. "Very good. I agree to what you have proposed." The elder was even more satisfied. He smiled and said, "Prince Li is indeed straightforward. The holy maiden will definitely be very grateful to your highness Prince Li." Imo Jingli snorted and said indifferently, "We each took what we needed. Give it to I still have to rush to Nanzhao Kingdom." The elder didn't hesitate. He took out 2 porcelain bottles and handed them to Imo Jingli. He said, "This is 3 months' worth of medicine. It's enough for Prince Li to use. It's not easy to take medicine and refine it. Our valley's doctors have only refined this much after so long." Imo Jingli put it away and said, "Many thanks, elder. I will take my leave." The elder smiled and said, "I'll have people escort Prince Li out of the valley." After Imo Jingli left with Princess Xixia, the girl following the elder asked, "Elder, who did Prince Li ask for this medicine for?" The elder sneered and said, "Who else could it be for? These people from the Central Plains have always been incomparably vicious. They won't even let their own blood relatives go. I don't know what kind of deep hatred the Emperor of Dechu State has with Prince Li that he would torture his own brother like this. You girls shouldn't get too involved with the people of the Central Plains. If one day you get harmed by them, you won't even be able to cry." The girls giggled. "We're not afraid of those people from the Central Plains. We'll use poisonous snakes to bite them to death. Otherwise, we'll imitate Prince Li and give them some Nepenthes powder. Let's see if they'll still be obedient." The elder smiled as he reprimanded the girls. At the same time, he led his people into the palace. Outside the palace, the voices gradually faded away. Imo Xiaoyao and Yi Li stood behind the pile of rocks and turned their gazes to the beautiful sea of flowers. "Nepenthes powder?" Imo Jingli gave it to Imo Jingqi. Yi Li sighed softly and said, "Imo Jingli's move is really vicious. If Imo Jingqi really fell for it, his life would be ruined. Look at those people just now. A month ago, they were definitely normal and healthy people. What plans does Li have?" Imo Xiaoyao asked in a low voice. Yi Li looked at the grand palace in front of her and said in a low voice, "Let's go in and take a look." Imo Xiaoyao nodded. He picked up Yi Li and jumped onto the roof of the palace. When they landed, there was no sound at all. Even the guards outside the palace did not hear anything. The two quietly landed. Yi Li frowned and said with some confusion, "The sacred land of Nanjiang should be a very tight place. Why is it that the guards on our way here are so lax?" Imo Xiaoyao thought for a moment and said, "In this place, the experts have probably all left by now." Yi Li's heart jumped. "You're talking about Nanzhao Imperial City?" Imo Xiaoyao nodded. If the secret of the sacred land of Nanjiang is this hidden luo flower, then it is not that important whether there are experts guarding it or not. I'm afraid that even if someone really enters the valley, they may not be able to find the hidden luo flower. The hidden luo flower was the legendary sacred land of Nanjiang. No one would think that the sacred land of Nanjiang could grow all over the place. And even if a few of them were taken away, it would not have much of an impact on the sacred land of Nanjiang. It seems that Xu Manlin and Tan Jiji's plans in Nanzhao Imperial City are not small. We should go back early, in case Big Brother and the others worry. Leaning in Mo Xiaoyao's arms and waiting for the patrolling guards to pass, Yi Li said in a low voice. To see his beloved wife so concerned about Su Qingchen, even if he knew that they were only siblings, Mo Xiaoyao could not help but feel jealous. He curled his lips and said, "Young Master Qingchen's wisdom is unparalleled. What is there to worry about?" Yi Li reached out and pinched him. She said helplessly, "How did Big Brother provoke you? Don't think that I don't know that you deliberately misled Big Brother into thinking that Big Brother likes men." Mo Xiaoyao snorted softly and muttered in a low voice, "I'm only speaking the truth." "Li, you also want to blame me. Li, you're really biased. When a man was childish, he could have no bottom line." This was the experience that Mo Xiaoyao had given him in the past few years. Yi Li rolled her eyes. She was too lazy to bother with him. She carefully walked forward. "Who are you? Since you're here, why don't you show yourself?" Suddenly, an old voice came from the palace. Yi Li cursed in her heart, but her body did not move at all. Even her breathing quietly slowed down a lot. Mo Xiaoyao quietly approached her and shook his head at her. Yi Li raised her eyebrows and looked around. They had hidden well along the way. It was reasonable to say that they were in the palace, and even if the palace was behind them, it should be impossible to find them. The palace was quiet for a while. The old voice sounded again, but with a bit of anger, "You trespassed into my sacred land of Nanjiang. Do you want me to personally come and invite you out?" On the roof opposite, a black shadow flew down and laughed loudly, "I'm Leitingfeng of Xiling. Please forgive me for disturbing you." The person in the palace snorted and said, "So it's the Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon. I was wondering who had the guts to trespass into my sacred land of Nanjiang." Leitingfeng smiled and said, "I trespassed here because I had no choice. Please forgive me. I really have something to ask of you. Please allow me to see you." They hadn't seen each other for a few years, but Leitingfeng was a lot more mature and steady than he was 5 years ago. With a few words, the anger of the people in the hall lessened by quite a bit. "The Crown Prince of the Jiannan King actually has a request for this seat, it's really rare. Come in, let me hear." Leitingfeng smiled and said, "Of course it's a matter of mutual benefit. I wouldn't dare to let you suffer a loss." Yi Li leaned in Mo Xiaoyao's arms and quietly pointed at Leitingfeng in the courtyard opposite the palace. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. After seeing Leitingfeng enter, he let go of Yi Li. With a tap of his foot, a swan goose silently landed on the roof of the main palace. "When we get back, we'll have Qilin's people come over and burn this valley." Yi Li nodded and said, "Have people keep an eye on the southern border. It might not be the only place that has that kind of thing." Mo Xiaoyao nodded and agreed. After resting for a while, Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li up and said with a smile, "We should go back. Let's find something interesting to play with on the way back." Yi Li raised her eyebrows. She didn't understand what he meant by something interesting. Mo Xiaoyao smiled darkly and said, "Robbery." On the official road to the southern Zhao kingdom, several horses galloped past. Leitingfeng was at the front. His handsome face had a smug smile. Just as he was thinking about something, he heard the sound of an arrow whistling through the air. Leitingfeng was startled. He slapped the back of his horse and soared into the air, dodging the arrow. The guards following behind him were also startled. "There's an assassin. Protect the air." The assassin didn't show himself. With 2 whooshing sounds, 2 more arrows shot out at the same time. 2 guards immediately fell to the ground. The other party's archery was very good. If they couldn't see the enemy, they could only be shot to death like targets. The guards gritted their teeth. Two of them protected Leitingfeng while the others flew in the direction of the arrows. They rushed into the forest on the side and found that it was empty. There wasn't a single person in sight. Not far away, Yili leaned against a large tree. The corners of her lips lifted slightly as she looked at the guards searching for her. These people didn't think that she would stay here and wait for them, right? The guards searched the forest for a while but didn't find anything. Just as they were about to leave the forest, a white figure suddenly flashed in front of them. One of the guards shouted in shock, "You!" Everyone felt a chill on their necks and fell to the ground in a daze. Leitingfeng waited on the road outside the forest for a while but still didn't see any movement in the forest. He knew that the guards who went in were most likely dead. For this trip, in order to not attract attention, he only brought a few guards with him. He didn't think that he would encounter such a troublesome assassin. Although his heart was anxious, Leitingfeng didn't show any panic on his face. He cupped his hands and said, "I don't know which senior is inside. If this one has offended you, I will definitely prepare a gift to apologize. I hope that senior will be lenient." What answered him was 2 arrows. The last 2 guards by his side fell to the ground. Leitingfeng's heart sank. He didn't care about anything else as he turned around and ran away. However, he didn't know that Imo Xiaoyao was waiting for this moment. Just as he turned around and ran a few steps, a majestic force came from behind him. Leitingfeng felt a pain in his chest and immediately lost consciousness. Imo Xiaoyao stood with his hands behind his back. He coldly looked at Leitingfeng who had fainted on the ground. Yili walked out from the forest. She put away the bow in her hands and looked at Leitingfeng with a smile. "Speaking of which, this is the second time that Genom of Gojoseon has fallen into our hands, right?" Imo Xiaoyao lightly snorted, not caring at all. Seeing that Yili was about to search Leitingfeng's body, he pulled her back and bent down to search Leitingfeng's body. A moment later, Imo Xiaoyao had 2 white porcelain bottles in his hands. They looked similar to the ones that Imo Jingli had. Yili took the porcelain bottle that Imo Xiaoyao handed over and opened it. She poured out a few pills and placed them under her nose to smell them. Although the appearance of the pills was a bit strange, the ingredients of the pills couldn't fool Yili. It was indeed made from the hidden Luo underworld flowers that filled the valleys of the southern border Holy Land. There were at least 20 pills in this small bottle. What surprised Yili was that the purity of these pills was quite impressive. She was afraid that the first time she used it, she wouldn't be able to bear it. She turned to ask Imo Xiaoyao. Imo Xiaoyao lightly said, "That elder said that at the beginning, we can only use water to dissolve a quarter of it." Yili said in a low voice, "So it was like that. What about him?" Imo Xiaoyao used his chin to point at the unconscious Leitingfeng and asked. Yili thought for a while and smiled, "We've already used Leitingfeng in exchange for benefits. If we use this trick again, Genom of Gojoseon will become angry. Let him lie here. There are people coming and going on this road, it's not convenient for us to bring another person with us." This suggestion was exactly what Imo Xiaoyao wanted. He also didn't want to bring a hindrance with him and Li. The 2 of them didn't hesitate to take all of Leitingfeng's valuables. They left behind only a set of clothes and rode off on their horses. The 2 of them took a detour along the way and delayed their journey for a few days. It was only 2 days before Princess Anqi's wedding that they returned to Nanzhao Kingdom. By this time, the envoys from various countries had arrived. Chapter 519. When the 2 entered the courtyard of the post house, they encountered Leitingfeng. Perhaps because of what had happened a few days ago, Leitingfeng's expression was not very good. Seeing Yili and Imo Xiaoyao come in hand, he first stilled before going forward to greet them. "Prince Ding, Princess Ding, you are." Yili did not avoid the greeting and said with a generous smile, "So it is Shitzi. We came a few days earlier than Shitzi and went out with the prince to walk around and experience the customs of Nanzhao. This trip was not in vain. But Shitzi. I see that Shitzi's expression is not very good. Did you just get to Nanzhao and had a bumpy journey? Yi Li's words were very sincere. Even Lei Tingfeng could not tell if Yi Li's words were sincere or if she was rejoicing in his misfortune. After all, although the matter of him encountering bandits on the road was known by everyone in Nanzhao Imperial City, Princess Ding had also said that she and Prince Ding had just returned from outside. Looking at Imo Xiaoyao standing behind Yi Li, Lei Tingfeng's mind suddenly moved. He smiled faintly and said, "Many thanks for Wang Fei's concern. Where did Prince Ding and Wang Fei go to play? After Princess Anqi's wedding, this one will have some free time to go out." Yi Li said with a smile. The prince said that Nanzhao has a snake valley. Inside, there are thousands of poisonous snakes and fiery red and beautiful flowers. I was curious and followed the prince to see what was going on. I have embarrassed myself in front of Shitzi. Lei Tingfeng frowned slightly. The Snake Valley and the road where he had been attacked were in the east and the west. They were not on the same road. In reality, Lei Tingfeng did not suspect Yi Li and Imo Xiaoyao too much. After all, the news of him going to the southern border Holy Land was very secretive. It could even be said that it was an impromptu decision. It was impossible for Imo Xiaoyao and Yi Li to have known beforehand that they were waiting for him on the road. It was just that the force that had struck him at the end was too strong. There weren't many people in the world who could do that. Now that he saw Imo Xiaoyao, he couldn't help but want to test him. Lei Tingfeng smiled and said, "If that's the case, then it's indeed a rare and beautiful place. Later on, I must go and enjoy it. Prince and Princess Consort have just returned and must be tired. This one will not disturb you any longer. Please excuse me." Yi Li nodded and smiled. "Take care, Shitzi." When they returned to the courtyard that Princess Anqi had arranged for them, Su Qingchen was already waiting for them. Young Master Qingchen was dressed in white. He was sitting at the stone table under the tree, leisurely brewing tea. He glanced at the two of them casually, which made Yi Li feel guilty for no reason. Yi Li felt guilty, but Imo Xiaoyao did not know what guilt was. He pulled Yi Li to the table and sat down without hesitation. Su Qingchen poured a cup of tea for each of them and said with a faint smile, "Prince and Princess Consort, did you enjoy your trip?" "It was all right." "The time was too short," Imo Xiaoyao said coolly. The corner of Su Qingchen's mouth twitched imperceptibly. He glanced coolly at Yi Li. Yi Li pulled Imo Xiaoyao guiltily. They had suddenly left. All the social matters in the palace had been left to eldest brother. It was normal for eldest brother to be angry. Imo Xiaoyao snorted softly. He looked at Su Qingchen and casually told him what he had seen in the southern border Holy Land. After Su Qingchen heard this, an expression that did not belong to young Master Qingchen finally appeared on his handsome face. Su Qingchen's expression was unusually dark. He gritted his teeth and said, "Prince is telling me that after you found such an important matter, you did not come back to deal with it, but took Princess Consort in a circle and then continued on your trip?" Imo Xiaoyao looked innocently at him. "What is wrong?" He looked at Yi Li with a wronged expression. "See, your brother is unreasonable." Yi Li rolled her eyes at the sky. Su Qingchen's anger had not subsided. "Do you have a brain? No one knows how many experts there are in the southern border Holy Land, and how dangerous it is. You dare to take Li Er and charge in? If you want to die, don't drag Li Er with you." Imo Xiaoyao said, "There's no one inside. Li and I went in and pretended to be there. No one discovered us when we came out." Su Qingchen smiled coldly. "That's because your luck is good. The day you left, Shu Manlin secretly sent hundreds of first-class experts into Imperial City." Imo Xiaoyao nodded in agreement. "I's luck has always been very good." Seeing Su Qingchen's expression change again, Yi Li hurriedly poured a cup of tea for him. "Eldest brother, calm down." "Prince." She glanced warningly at Imo Xiaoyao. Imo Xiaoyao twisted his mouth in dissatisfaction. Li was the most biased. Looking at the two men who didn't like each other, Yi Li sighed helplessly. She didn't count on Imo Xiaoyao anymore. She told them everything that had happened. Hearing Yili mention the hidden luo flower, Su Qingchen couldn't be bothered to be angry with Mo Xiaoyao anymore. His handsome brows furrowed as he said in a low voice, Mo Jingli wants to give that to the emperor? Yili nodded and said, I think so. In these years, Mo Jingqi and his brother seem to be in harmony, but in reality, they've been fighting both openly and secretly. Mo Jingli sits on the richest half of Dechu State's southern territory. How could he be willing to be under one person? He probably can't wait. Su Qingchen laughed coldly, idiot. The southern border people clearly don't have good intentions. Does Mo Jingli think that by using this method to kill Mo Jingqi, Shu Manlin won't have something that can be used against him? The Dechu state was different from the southern border. It paid the most attention to propriety, righteousness, honor, loyalty, filial piety, and righteousness. Once the news of Mo Jingli murdering his elder brother the emperor spread, he might as well start a rebellion if he wanted to sit on the throne. When the Nanzhao people have something that can be used against him, Mo Jingli would just be a puppet. Shu Manlin has a good plan. Does Big Brother have news of Tan Jiji? Yili said with a faint smile. Su Qingchen nodded and said, I have some understanding of Shu Manlin. She doesn't have the brains. It must be Tan Jiji who gave her the idea behind the scenes. Getting rid of Princess Anqi and obtaining Nanzhao, then controlling Mo Jingli from behind the scenes to control the Dechu state, it really is a good idea. It's just that his thinking is a bit too smooth. Yili looked at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, Xiaoyao, what do you think? Mo Xiaoyao leaned against the tree behind him and said with a lazy smile, what can I think? What does the brothers fighting for the throne have to do with us outsiders? In this way, he didn't care. Su Qingchen sighed softly. Mo Xiaoyao and the Dechu state's imperial family had a deep hatred. Many people were secretly surprised that Mo Xiaoyao didn't send out troops from the start. He naturally couldn't save Mo Jingqi. Mo Jingqi had been guarding the Prince Ding mansion against Mo Xiaowen and Mo Xiaoyao ever since the registration. He probably didn't expect that the person who wanted his life the most was his biological younger brother. Thinking about it, Su Qingchen nodded and said, fine, it's right for us to ignore this matter. The Northwest had already broken off relations with the Dechu state. Then it was best for them to not participate in the Dechu state's affairs. Although they were at peace now, everyone knew that there would be a day when the Dechu state and the Northwest would fight. If the Northwest interfered in the Dechu state's internal affairs during this time, it would be bad for the reputation of Prince Ding and the Mahist army. Shu Manlin probably has big plans this time. Thinking of the hundreds of experts that Shu Manlin had transferred from the sacred land of Nanjiang, Su Qingchen frowned and said. Those who could live in the sacred land of Nanjiang were definitely top experts. More importantly, the people of Nanzhao were good at using poisonous goo. This made them even more dangerous. Because of this, the people of the Central Plains didn't like to interact with the people of Nanjiang. They didn't bring many guards this time. If something really happened, it would be very troublesome. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, I'm afraid Princess Anqi isn't easy to deal with. With young Master Qingchen's secret guidance, she'll be even more powerful. Princess Anqi was able to fight against Shu Manlin for so many years under the protection of the king of Nanzhao and still remain undefeated. Naturally, she wasn't someone who could be easily bullied. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and nodded. Princess Anqi told me that Pu Ah and her grandfather's tribe sent many experts. And over the years, she has many loyal death warriors under her. But this wedding. A good wedding would inevitably be stained with blood. Mo Xiaoyao said, the people of Nanzhao don't believe in this. I'm sure they won't mind. Su Qingchen was helpless. Was this a matter of whether they minded or not? No one would be happy to see a bloodbath at their wedding. Yili put her elbow on the table and said thoughtfully, could it be that Princess Anqi held this wedding to deal with Shu Manlin? Su Qingchen was startled, what do you mean? Yili shook her head and said, I don't know. I just think that Princess Anqi's wedding came too suddenly. And, she even secretly invited experts to help. If Princess Anqi was not a clairvoyant, then she must have deliberately set a trap for Xu Manlin to turn inside. But this doesn't make sense. After all, the king of Nanzhao is still here. Even if Princess Anqi wins, she can't kill Xu Manlin. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, I'm afraid that Princess Anqi was forced by Xu Manlin and the king of Nanzhao and had to take the risk. Have you noticed that the king of Nanzhao's attitude towards Pu A can be said to be completely ignored? That is to say, the king of Nanzhao doesn't really agree with this wedding. In his heart, I'm afraid that the king of Nanzhao wants to depose Princess Anqi. The king of Nanzhao has no other children. To depose Princess Anqi, Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, of course it's Xu Manlin. The Saintess of Nanjiang has a unique status in Nanzhao. In history, there have been cases where the Saintess of Nanjiang temporarily took over the throne, although it was only for a very short period of time. And in recent years, Xu Manlin has been respected as the savior of Nanzhao. The restrictions she has been subjected to are far less than the previous saintesses. It can be said that there are almost no restrictions. In recent years, her influence in the court has gradually been able to compete with Princess Anqi's. In this case, it's not impossible to persuade the king of Nanzhao to appoint another crown princess. Yi Li sighed helplessly. Just listening to the struggles for power in the royal family made her feel tired. It was hard for a girl like Princess Anqi to be able to persevere in such a situation. What does the prince mean? Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, the crown princess can't be deposed, and the saintess of Nanjiang can't die. Su Qingchen was silent. Mo Xiaoyao wanted to keep them to continue fighting, in case the Nanzhao started other things when they were free. After all, the Nanzhao people were eyeing the Central Plains covetously. Even if the Dechu state had nothing to do with the Mahist army now, they couldn't let the Nanzhao covet it. Chapter 520. Reporting to Princess Changel, noble consort Lu of the Dechu state, requests an audience. An imperial bodyguard came in to report. Whenever Yi Li thought of noble consort Lu, she felt uncomfortable. It wasn't that she didn't believe in Mo Xiaoyao's feelings for her. Rather, it was that a fly was always flying in front of you, yet you couldn't slap her to death. It always made one feel uncomfortable. For the first time, Yi Li discovered that Su Zuodi and Yi Ying, whom she originally hated the most, were nothing in front of this woman. Su Zuodi was only narcissistic and vain. Yi Ying was only opinionated and had a bit of selfishness that everyone had. Compared to noble consort Lu's pestering, these were nothing. Mo Xiaoyao had treated her so rudely, yet she still came to visit. Yi Li didn't know where she got her mental fortitude from. Although it was said that only stupid women dealt with other women, smart women dealt with men. Against someone like noble consort Lu, no matter how well-behaved a man was, it was useless. Seeing Yi Li's unsightly expression, Mo Xiaoyao became happy. Yi Li glanced at him and said indifferently, Prince is so happy. In that case, Prince should go see noble consort Lu himself. Su Qingchen nodded and said, Li is right. I saw that noble consort Lu received news of your return and made a special trip over. She most likely didn't come to see Li. Don't waste your energy. Li must be tired these past few days. Go back to your room and rest. Hearing this, Mo Xiaoyao glared at Su Qingchen with resentment. His hands rested on Yi Li's body, unwilling to let go. Don't. Li don't go. Su Qingchen speechlessly looked at the increasingly childish man and helpless little sister in front of her. She stood up and left. Even though she knew that Mo Xiaoyao was acting, Li couldn't bear to part with him. What could he do? He didn't feel like sitting there and being an eyesore. As the saying goes, even an honest and upright official would find it difficult to resolve a family dispute. Those two people, one was willing to hit while the other was willing to be hit. It really had nothing to do with him. Young Master Qingchen sighed helplessly as he turned around to look at the two people who were sitting together. Young Master Qingchen, who had not been troubled by love for half of his life, could not understand this kind of mutual affection. What is love? How would this young master know? Mo Xiaoyao accompanied Yi Li for a long time to coax his wife. He silently remembered that in the future, even if he felt proud because Ali cared about him, he must not show it in front of Ali, otherwise, Ali would be shy. The guards in the yard were used to seeing their prince fawning over the princess consort without caring about his image. Young Master Feng San was right. It was normal to be henpecked. By the time noble consort Lu and Princess Changel were invited inside, their complexions were quite unsightly. Prince Ding's ability to coax people was not good enough. As a result, noble consort Lu had to wait for nearly an hour before she was allowed to enter. When Princess Changel saw Yi Li smile, she winked at her. Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded her head. Extending her hand, she beckoned Princess Changel over to sit. Princess Changel bluntly walked over to Yi Li's side and sat down. Laughing softly, she asked, "Princess Ding, did you and royal uncle go out to play? Yesterday, I wanted to find you to play, but young Master Feng San said that you were not here." Yi Li nodded her head and replied with a smile, "I have indeed not been here these past few days." "Did Princess just arrive yesterday?" Princess Changel nodded her head and said, "You all walked so quickly. Our carriage couldn't keep up with you." Noble consort Lu walked over. Looking at Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao, she asked, "Has the prince been well these past few days?" Mo Xiaoyao leaned against Yi Li, paying no attention to her words. Noble consort Lu could not help but change her expression. Clenching her teeth, she continued, "Princess consort, I have something to discuss with the prince. Would it be possible for me to leave for a moment?" Yi Li raised her eyes and glanced at noble consort Lu before lowering her head to look at Mo Xiaoyao, who was leaning against her. Mo Xiaoyao raised his head and gazed pitifully at her. His pair of dark eyes appeared particularly bright under his snow-white hair. "Wife, your husband has not spoken with her. Don't leave me behind, pft." Seated to the side, Princess Changel could not help but burst out in laughter. She nearly choked on the tea she had just swallowed and could only cough incessantly. "Princess consort. Uncle Prince Ding." Princess Changel truly did not know what to say. In her mind, Uncle Prince Ding had always been wise, mighty, and unapproachable. However, was this person who was gazing pitifully at Princess Ding really the awe-inspiring Uncle Prince Ding? Yi Li helplessly rolled her eyes at Mo Xiaoyao. To Princess Changel, she said, "He's gone crazy. Don't pay attention to him." Mo Xiaoyao was displeased. His handsome face rubbed against Yi Li's body. "Wife, this woman harbors ill intentions towards your husband. You have to protect me. Good boy." Yi Li reached out and patted him, speaking perfunctorily. Raising her head to look at noble consort Lu, Yi Li sternly stated, "Noble consort, you frightened our prince." Noble consort Lu's beautiful face instantly distorted. Forcing a smile, she replied, "Miss Yi must be joking. The prince is unparalleled in wisdom and courage. How could he be frightened by me?" Yi Li indifferently replied, "That's not necessarily true. Clingy women are the most frightening. Our prince has always been most afraid of those shameless women. Take a look and see if he's frightened." Mo Xiaoyao repeatedly nodded his head. Although his face could not be seen, his unhesitatingly nodding his head caused noble consort Lu to lose all face. "Yi Li, you!" Noble consort Lu finally could not bear it any longer. She did her best to maintain her good manners as she sternly shouted. However, before she could say anything, a cold and gloomy gaze interrupted her words. Mo Xiaoyao leaned his head against Yi Li's shoulder and turned his face. His silver hair covered most of his face, but his eyes, carrying a sinister and ruthless aura that seemed to have come from the depths of hell, stared straight at noble consort Lu. Noble consort Lu had always hoped that this man would look her in the eye. At that time, when Mo Xiaoyao's gaze truly landed on her body, she felt as if her entire body had been frozen. Even though the fear in her heart had nearly taken over her entire being, she was so stiff that she did not even dare to move. That pair of deep, handsome eyes carried an unprecedented killing intent. Noble consort Lu even suspected that her eyes were playing tricks on her, that she had seen a flash of blood in Mo Xiaoyao's eyes. Since the prince has matters to attend to, I will take my leave first. Finished speaking, noble consort Lu walked out of the courtyard without the slightest hesitation, as if an evil spirit were chasing after her. She even forgot to call Princess Changle to return with her. Yi Li and Princess Changle looked at each other in dismay. They did not understand why noble consort Lu, who had previously refused to leave, would suddenly run away as if she had seen a ghost. "Prince, what did you do?" Yi Li asked, raising her eyebrows. Mo Xiaoyao innocently blinked his eyes. "How could I do anything to her?" "Princess Li, have a good chat with Changle. I'll go find Feng Xiao and have a drink together." Yi Li knew that he was looking for Feng Xiao. Nodding her head, she watched as he rose and left. Only after Mo Xiaoyao had left did Princess Changle put down the teacup she had been holding. Leaning over the table, she began to giggle. Looking at her helplessly, Yi Li asked, "Is it really that funny?" Princess Changle's eyes curved into crescents as she laughed. Raising her head to look at Yi Li, she stated, "Of course it's funny. If it weren't for the fact that the princess consort is also here, I truly wouldn't dare to believe that this is Uncle Ding." Before I left, Imperial Father didn't allow me to see Imperial Mother. I don't know. At this point, the girl who was trying her best to hide her emotions with a smile finally couldn't hold back her tears. Thinking back to the last time she had seen her Imperial Mother, the apologetic expression on her mother's face, Princess Changle could not stop her eyes from brimming with tears. Yi Li understood. Mo Jingqi's actions were not just for the marriage alliance with Nanzhao, but to use this to humiliate the Empress and the Hua family. However, no matter how dissatisfied Mo Jingqi was with the Empress and the Hua family, could it be that he had forgotten that Changle was his own flesh and blood? Looking at the dainty young girl before her, Yi Li sighed softly. She asked, "Do you truly intend to follow your imperial father's arrangements? Although I don't have a daughter, I still have children. If a child were to encounter such a situation, how heartbroken would a mother be? Let's not talk about your imperial father, but your imperial mother. If you were truly to be gifted to the king of Nanzhao, I fear that your imperial mother would feel guilty for the rest of her life." Princess Changle raised her hand to wipe away her tears. Choking with sobs, she replied, "In the past, I told Princess that if the Dechu state needed a political marriage in the future, as a princess, I would naturally not shirk my duty. Only now do I know, the so-called responsibility of a princess was nothing more than my own self-righteousness. Imperial Father simply did not need me, his daughter, to help him forge a political marriage and strengthen the friendship between the two countries. All he wanted was to see his maternal grandfather, the Empress Dowager, and his imperial mother unhappy. He wanted to embarrass the Hua family. That day, when Imperial Mother went to speak to Imperial Father about my marriage, I heard it from outside the door. Imperial Father said that he would not allow me to marry openly, nor would he allow me to remain in the Chu capital. Given my status, if I were to marry into another country, at the very least, I would be the official consort of a prince. He said that in the future, if I were to side with outsiders, I would definitely help others deal with him. If I were to marry into the Chu capital, I would definitely rope in my husband's family to help the Hua family make things difficult for him. As a result, he wanted to send me to Nanzhao, making it so that I would never be the Empress of Nanzhao and could only be a lowly consort." Hearing Princess Changle's words, Yi Li could not help but want to give Mo Jingqi a vicious beating. Sighing, she asked, "Princess, should I have someone escort you out of here?" Shaking her head, Princess Changle replied, "Many thanks to Princess, but there is no need for this. Since Changle has promised Imperial Father to come to Nanzhao, I will not escape midway." Han Mingxi snorted softly and raised his eyebrows. Didn't Prince often change his expression? Was that why his older brother was unable to see through people? "Alright, Mingxi, why did you make a trip to Nanzhao?" Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao was really about to explode, Yi Li hurriedly interrupted. Han Mingxi's expression changed and he nodded, that's right. After I sent Yaoji back to the Chu capital, I met with Leng Haoyu. It was he who wanted me to pass a message to the prince and the princess. Seeing Han Mingxi like this, Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li knew that it must be an extremely important matter. Otherwise, Leng Haoyu would not have asked Han Mingxi to pass the message instead of directly sending someone to deliver it to Li City. Yi Li frowned slightly and said, "What happened to the Chu capital?" Han Mingxi shook his head and said, "Nothing happened to the Chu capital, but I'm afraid that something will happen to Mo Jingqi." Mo Xiaoyao snorted disdainfully. Was it strange that something would happen to Mo Jingqi? Even his own younger brother wanted to kill him. It could be seen how much he wanted to anger the heavens and people. It would be strange if nothing happened. Han Mingxi looked at the two's expressions and understood. He said with a smile, "It seems that it's not just one group that wants to deal with Mo Jingqi. Could it be that the prince also knows something? Let me think, is it Mo Jingli?" Yi Li did not answer and asked with a smile, "The one you want to talk about is not Mo Jingli?" Han Mingxi said with a smile, "Of course not, it's the Lu family." The Lu family? Yi Li was surprised. Although they had guessed that the Lu family was very ambitious, why did they want to deal with Mo Jingqi? At present, the Lu family that Mo Jingqi trusted the most and favored noble consort Lu the most. What benefit could they get from dealing with Mo Jingqi? Mo Xiaoyao frowned slightly and quickly reacted. He asked, "The Lu family wants to help noble consort Lu's imperial son ascend the throne?" A trace of admiration flashed through Han Mingxi's eyes. He nodded and said, "Correct. Speaking of which, Mo Jingqi's luck is not bad." Originally, the Lu family had planned to act soon. After taking over Mo Jingqi, they suddenly sent Prime Minister Lu to Nanzhao. This caused the Lu family to panic for a while, and only then did our people see the clues. Otherwise, the news we received might have been that the Dechu state had a new emperor and that Mo Jingqi had died. Yi Li couldn't help but rub her forehead. How did Mo Jingqi make himself so isolated? Mo Xiaoyao was unmoved. How is this important news? Does Leng Haoyu have nothing better to do? What did it have to do with him whether Mo Jingqi died or not? The more miserable Mo Jingqi died, the happier he would be. Although it was a bit regretful that he didn't do it himself, he didn't mind if someone else was willing to do it for him. Han Mingxi rolled his eyes. If that's the case, naturally no one would care about this matter. However, Leng Haoyu said that this matter wasn't just the work of the Lu family. It seems that the northern tribes and some tribes in the north are also involved. I'm afraid that the day Mo Jingqi dies is the day these people enter the Dechu state. The northern tribes and the tribes in the north are all involved? Han Mingxi nodded. Otherwise, with the Lu family's ability, how could they have the courage to usurp the throne without the support of others? Yi Li frowned. In a low voice, she said, "Princess Chang'e is likely to be in danger." Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "Someone wants to drive a wedge between Mo Jingqi and the Hua family. Naturally, it is best to start with Princess Chang'e." Chapter 522. Nanzhao's wedding was very different from that of the Central Plains. Princess Anqi and Pu Hei's wedding was held in the square in front of the palace. Not only the nobles and envoys of Nanjiang, but also the common people of Nanzhao gathered in the square to celebrate the princess's wedding. Although the northwest was not big and was not even a real country, Nanzhao still arranged for Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li to sit closest to the king of Nanzhao and the newlyweds. Even the envoys of Dechu State and West Hill had to sit behind them. Although Prime Minister Lu was unhappy because of this, he was not a reckless man. Naturally, he would not confront Mo Xiaoyao because of this. Lei Tengfeng's face was still gloomy and his eyebrows were tightly knitted. Obviously, he was very worried about being robbed and losing the medicine he had just obtained. However, this time, Genom King of Gojoseon did not come with him because he wanted his son to be independent. Therefore, Lei Tengfeng could not find anyone to discuss with. Princess Anqi was wearing a snow-white dress embroidered with delicate blue patterns. She was sitting next to the groom. She usually looked valiant, but now she looked more beautiful. Shu Manlin was wearing a saintess's yellow robe and exquisite makeup. She was sitting next to the king of Nanzhao with a smile, but she seemed to be more dazzling than the bride. If it were not for noble consort Lu, who was even more beautiful and cold, most people's eyes would have fallen on her. Feng Zhiao was sitting behind Yili and Imo Shouyao. He looked at the women present and teased, "Oh, princess, you seem to have been defeated." Yili pursed her lips and smiled faintly. She did not answer. She didn't want to steal the bride's attention. Imo Shouyao looked down at his wife beside him. She was wearing a light blue robe and her hair was in a simple and neat bun with 2 blue jade hairpins. She looked elegant and graceful. Under the moonlight and the lights, her eyes looked even more beautiful and charming. In Ai's eyes, Miss Li is the most beautiful. Yili looked at him with a smile and said, "Master Prince Ding, no matter how well you say it, I won't forget that you still have a confidant who is eagerly waiting for you." Imo Shouyao, of course, also sensed a certain someone's gaze. He snorted disdainfully and said, "If Lily doesn't like it, I'll just get someone to dig out that pair of eyes. What do I need eyeballs for? Do you want to eat?" Yili rolled her eyes. Imo Shouyao seriously considered for a moment, then said, "It doesn't taste good, feed it to Imo Xiaobao." Yili was completely speechless. It didn't taste good, so she fed it to Imo Xiaobao. Was that what he meant? Was Imo Xiaobao really someone he had picked up from the outside? She glared fiercely at Imo Shouyao. "If you don't want to feed Imo Xiaobao, how about feeding Debao?" Imo Shouyao blinked and understood who the Debao in Yili's mouth was. Frowning, he said, "I don't want to eat it." Behind them, Feng Zhiao was sweating profusely. How cheap was his mouth to be so talkative? Also, how capable were the 2 people in front of them to be able to deviate from the topic to such an extent? Please don't discuss such a cruel topic at someone else's wedding, okay? If Princess Anshi's marriage is unlucky in the future, it will definitely be because of you too. Princess Consort. Princess Changel doesn't seem to have appeared. Finally, Feng Zhiao could not stand the increasingly cruel conversation and spoke up to remind her. Yili looked towards the table of the emissaries from the Dechu state. Sure enough, she did not see Princess Anshi. Instead, she saw noble consort Lu, who had been staring fixedly at Imo Shouyao, reveal a strange smile. Yili frowned in thought. Turning her head, she gave Feng Zhiao a few instructions in a low voice. Feng Zhiao's expression changed slightly. Finally, while no one was paying attention, he stealthily withdrew from the plaza. Feng Zhiao's stealthy withdrawal did not affect anyone. Imo Shouyao and Yili continued to chat and laugh in low voices. Although the 2 of them had no intention of competing with the newlyweds for attention, the gazes on them did not lessen at all. Imo Shouyao inadvertently looked towards the opposite side, just in time to see Mo Jingli staring at him in a daze, as well as Lei Tingfeng's pensive expression. A cold light flashed through his eyes. He snorted softly and smiled mockingly at Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli naturally saw the cold smile on Imo Shouyao's face. However, he did not feel the embarrassment of being caught peeping at someone else's wife. Instead, he proudly glared at Imo Shouyao. Imo Shouyao raised the wine cup in his hand and silently said, "I wish you all the best." Although Mo Jingli had always disliked Imo Shouyao, he still paid close attention to his every move. Naturally, he understood Imo Shouyao's meaning. At first, he did not take it to heart. However, when he saw the faint smile on Imo Shouyao's face, his heart couldn't help but tremble. He felt as if something had been seen through by Imo Shouyao. This feeling of his most secret being seen through by an enemy made Imo Jingli feel very uncomfortable. Naturally, he was not in the mood to look at Yili. After the king of Nanzhao personally held the wedding for Princess Anshi and Puo Ju, he returned to the palace early. Then the entire square became a sea of joy. Everyone, including Princess Anshi and her new husband, sang and danced happily. Amidst this joy, Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao sat in the most inconspicuous corner and watched everything in front of them. The weddings in Nanjiang are not as formal as those in the Central Plains, but they are more lively, Yi Li said in a low voice with a laugh. Mo Xiaoyao looked with interest at the people dancing and singing below. He asked, "Miss Li, should we go down and have fun with them?" Yi Li glanced coolly at him and said, "If you like, go yourself. I don't know how to dance." Mo Xiaoyao was slightly regretful but quickly thought better of it. "Then never mind. I don't want to see Miss Li dance in front of others." Princess Consort. Zhuo Jing appeared behind the two and whispered a few words into Yi Li's ear. Yi Li frowned. Raising her head, she said to Mo Xiaoyao, "Something has happened with Chang'e. Let's go first." Although Mo Xiaoyao was not very familiar with Princess Chang'e, she was still the daughter of Empress Hua. Moreover, Mo Xiaoyao had a favorable impression of the little girl. She was completely different from her father. Nodding his head, Zhuo Jing pulled Yi Li and prepared to leave. However, he was stopped by a voice behind him. "Prince, are you going back so early?" At some point, noble consort Lu had walked over. Even though the night was lit and the crowd was surging, noble consort Lu was still dressed in white. She was like the cold snow of a high mountain, stunning others yet not daring to approach her. Mo Xiaoyao frowned. Indifferently, he asked, "What does it have to do with you?" Noble consort Lu smiled faintly and replied, "Right now, the envoys from various countries are still present. For Prince Ding to leave early, isn't that disrespectful to the host?" The three people present were the center of attention. With just a few words, Mo Jingli, Lei Tingfeng, and the others' gazes all swept over. Yi Li frowned. Glancing at Mo Xiaoyao, she said, "Noble consort Lu is right. Since this is the case, Prince, there is no need for you to accompany me back. I will go back by myself." Not only was there a problem with Princess Chang'e, but Princess Anqi also needed someone to watch over her. Chapter 523. Mo Xiaoyao hesitated for a moment, already understanding Yi Li's intentions. However, he still pretended to be worried. "Can you go back by yourself?" Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded. Suspicious, noble consort Lu sized up Yi Li and asked, "What's wrong, Miss Yi?" Yi Li indifferently replied, "There are too many people tonight. This consort is feeling a bit uncomfortable, that's all." "Thank you for your concern, noble consort Lu." "Is that so?" Noble consort Lu declined to comment. However, it was clear that she was extremely happy that Yi Li had left alone. For once, she warmed her expression towards Yi Li. Then, Miss Yi should return early to rest. Yi Li was disinclined to pay attention to this woman who had a mental problem. Nodding to Mo Xiaoyao, she left the plaza with Zhuo Jing. Upon returning to the post house, just as she entered the courtyard, Feng Zhiyao hurriedly came out to welcome her. His expression was somewhat unsightly. "Princess consort. What happened to Princess Chang'e?" Yi Li asked. With a gloomy expression, Feng Zhiyao replied, "Princess Chang'e has been sent to the palace." Yi Li frowned. "When did this happen?" Feng Zhiyao replied, "When we went to participate in the wedding banquet, I was a step too late. Princess Chang'e had already been sent to the palace." With the spies that the Prince Ding mansion had placed in the Nanzhao Palace, it was not impossible for them to bring Princess Chang'e out. However, the price of doing so would inevitably be exposing the spies of the Prince Ding mansion. Furthermore, bringing Princess Chang'e out would result in a series of troubles. This was not something that Feng Zhiyao could decide. Yi Li pondered for a moment before replying, "The Prince of Nanzhao has just returned to the palace. According to Nanzhao's customs, if we enter the palace now, we might still be able to make it." A light flashed in Feng Zhiyao's eyes. "Many thanks, Princess Consort." There were not many people who came to Nanzhao this time, but Yi Li only needed Feng Zhiyao, Qin Feng, Zhuo Jing, Lin Han, and the two Qilin to enter the Nanzhao Palace. The group bypassed the noisy square in front of the palace and snuck into the palace without alerting the palace guards. Previously, Feng Xiao had already investigated clearly. Princess Chengel had been directly sent to the bedchamber of the Prince of Nanzhao. Therefore, as soon as they entered the palace, they went straight to the Nanzhao king's bedroom. However, just as they arrived outside the bedroom, they heard a commotion coming from inside. "There's an assassin!" Feng Xiao was shocked. "Have we been discovered?" Qin Feng shook his head and reached out to press down on Feng Xiao, who was about to draw his sword. The defenses of the Nanzhao palace are not that strong. With the exception of Feng Xiao, they were all top-notch concealment experts. As long as they were careful at all times, it was impossible for the Nanzhao palace's imperial bodyguards to discover them. Sure enough, the imperial bodyguards who had heard the news did not even glance in their direction. One after another, they rushed into the bedroom. Immediately, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard from the bedroom. Yili raised her hand and gestured to the group behind her. The two Qilin, Zhuojing, and Lin Han split into two groups and ran towards the palace from the left and right. Very quickly, four shadows appeared on the roof of the bedroom. One of them gestured towards them. Before Feng Xiao could react, he was grabbed by Qin Feng, who was beside him, and flew towards the roof of the opposite palace. By the time Feng Xiao steadied himself with great difficulty, the four shadows had already disappeared without a trace. Helpless, Feng Xiao said, "Brother Qin, my Qinggong is not bad." In addition, what did those gestures mean? Although Feng Xiao had some contact with the Qilin, he still didn't quite understand the way these people acted. Qin Feng indifferently replied, "Sign language." The princess consort wanted them to split into two groups to check the situation in front. They said that this side was safe. Feng Xiao snorted disdainfully. Why go through so much trouble? Experts all directly charge in. If they rushed in like this to rescue someone, it would be too late. Qin Feng indifferently glanced at him. That's why experts die quickly. The princess consort said that although sacrifice is often unavoidable, the lives of ordinary soldiers are still lives. Even if it is unavoidable, it should be minimized. Feng Xiao was startled, speechlessly rubbing his nose. Very quickly, another shadow appeared from under the eaves, making an extremely short gesture. Qin Feng stood up and said, "Let's go quickly. There aren't assassins inside. They should be people who came to rescue Princess Chengel." By the time the two of them arrived at the innermost bedroom of the Nanzhao palace, a fight was taking place in front of it. As far as the eye could see, Feng Xiao could not see where the four people were hiding. At some unknown time, Yili had appeared beside the two. She asked, "Are those people from the Hua family down there?" Feng Xiao's expression changed. Staring fixedly at the people fighting below, he replied, "It should be. Other than the Hua family, I cannot think of anyone else who would come to rescue Princess Chengel. However, why did they wait until now to rescue her? No matter what, it was much more convenient to rescue someone on the road than in the Nanzhao palace. Naturally, there is a reason why they can only rescue someone in the Nanzhao palace," Yili replied. "Let's go in and take a look at Princess Chengel. Qin Feng, watch this place." Qin Feng nodded. "Princess consort, please be at ease." It was naturally not easy to avoid the eyes and ears of so many imperial bodyguards and enter the bedroom. As a result, Yili did not do so. Instead, she led Feng Xiao up the roof. After arriving at a certain location, she stopped. Pointing below, she said, "This is the bedroom of the king of Nanzhao." Yili quickly removed the glazed tiles from the roof, not making the slightest sound. Very quickly, everything within the bedroom fell into their eyes. Yili had chosen an excellent position. Looking down from above, she could see most of the bedroom. As for the people in the room, because they were blocked by the roof beams, unless they walked down to the hole, it would be very difficult for them to see that a hole had been opened in the roof. Feng Xiao watched as Yili descended from the hole in the roof, silently standing on the roof beam. However, the people in the room were completely unaware of this. With a gloomy expression, the king of Nanzhao stared at Princess Changel, who was sitting on a soft couch not far away. His eyes flashed with lust and ruthless anger. This was the eldest princess of the first wife of the Dechu state. Although she was still young, she was already a young beauty. In 2 more years, she would surpass his daughter, Princess Xixia, who had once been known as the #1 beauty of Nanzhao. Originally, it was not very likely that he would marry such a princess. In the history of the Dechu state, it was extremely rare for a princess to be given away for political purposes, especially a princess of the first wife. Although he did not know why the emperor of the Dechu state would give him such a noble princess, he was still extremely satisfied with this gift. Princess Changel sat on the soft couch, nervously staring at the tightly shut door to the palace hall. Her hands, hidden within her sleeves, were tightly gripped. The king of Nanzhao stared at her without blinking, completely ignoring the assassins outside the palace hall. Staring at Princess Changel's dainty appearance, he revealed an impatient and covetous expression. Truly a young beauty. The princesses of the Dechu state are indeed different from the rest. You don't need to worry about the assassins outside. Not to mention a mere dozen people, even if there were 10 times as many people, it would be impossible for them to leave the Nanzhao palace alive. Princess Changel's body trembled, looking at the door in alarm. Finally, a trace of anxiety appeared on her face. Seeing the change in her expression, the king of Nanzhao became even more pleased. "Ha, my young beauty, it's best that you obediently submit to I. As long as you are obedient, I can leave the corpses of those people outside intact." Princess Changel clenched her teeth. Suddenly, she stood up and rushed towards the door. How could the king of Nanzhao allow her to rush out? Reaching out, he tightly grasped one of her arms. "Young beauty, what are you in such a hurry for, ha?" Princess Changel struggled incessantly. However, how could a weak girl like her be a match for the king of Nanzhao? Her bound arm was unable to move at all, and her face revealed a pained expression. She decided to stop running. Raising her voice, she shouted, "No matter who is outside, I don't want you to save me. Quickly leave." The people fighting outside the palace hall clearly heard her voice. Immediately, one of them shouted, "Princess, this subordinate will definitely save you. All of you, leave. I don't want you to save me." Tears streamed down Princess Changel's clear eyes as she sternly shouted. Seeing the king of Nanzhao's complacent, evil grin and his face close to hers, a trace of determination flashed across Princess Changel's dainty face. Suddenly, Princess Changel raised her still free right hand. A streak of cold light shot out from her sleeve. A dagger glittering with cold light appeared in Princess Changel's hand. Without the slightest hesitation, she stabbed towards the king of Nanzhao's hand. How could the king of Nanzhao allow her to stab him with a bayonet? Immediately, he released his hand, causing Princess Changel to stab empty air. Not expecting that this delicate and weak girl before him would actually be so daring, the king of Nanzhao flew into a rage out of humiliation. He slapped Princess Changel across the face, causing her to fall to the ground, a trace of blood seeping out from the corner of her lips. Princess Changel sat on the ground. Raising her head, she coldly gazed at the king of Nanzhao. There was not the slightest trace of fear on her face. Instead, there was the arrogance of a noble princess and contempt for the king of Nanzhao. "You are not worthy of humiliating this princess." Finished speaking, Princess Changel unhesitatingly raised the dagger and stabbed towards her own chest. Whoosh! A streak of green light shot down from the ceiling, striking the dagger in Princess Changel's hand. The enormous force of the collision sent the dagger flying. At the same time, a dark green hairpin was nailed to a nearby pillar by Princess Changel's side. The Nanzhao king looked in shock at this sudden situation and raised his head to look at the roof beam. He looked up and saw Yi Li, dressed in black, nonchalantly sitting on the ceiling beam, smiling and nodding at him. The king of Nanzhao recovered from his shock. Just as he was about to call for his imperial bodyguards, he saw a green shadow flash before him. Yi had already arrived in front of him. Without the slightest hesitation, she placed a dagger against his neck. Yi helplessly looked at Princess Changel and said, "Girl, you are truly ruthless in your actions. With that dagger, you won't even need to take half a breath to see the King of Hell." Your Highness." Princess Changel stared at Yi in a daze. Clearly, she did not understand why Yi would appear here. In a heavy voice, the King of Nanzhao asked, "Princess Ding, what is the meaning of this?" Helplessly, Yi replied, "In a moment of desperation, I had no other choice. King of Nanzhao, please forgive me." Yi was truly helpless. Since she could not kill the King of Nanzhao, she originally had no intention of appearing before him. As a result, just as she was considering how to make the King of Nanzhao unconscious and take Princess Changel away, before she could act, this scene occurred below. For the sake of Princess Changel's life, Yi could only deflect the dagger in Princess Changel's hand. At the same time, she exposed herself in front of others. Chapter 524. Outside the palace hall, the fighting was still in full swing. However, inside the palace hall, the atmosphere was cold and silent. Yi's expression was calm as she looked at the King of Nanzhao, who was a head taller than her. Her elegant face revealed an apologetic expression, as if she truly felt guilty for holding him hostage. However, the dagger placed against the King of Nanzhao's neck showed no signs of moving away. The King of Nanzhao only felt the skin on his neck being pierced by the ice-cold dagger, causing his hair to stand on end. "Princess Ding, what are you trying to do?" Yi glanced at Princess Changel, who was sitting on the ground. Pursing her lips, she smiled and said, "Why does the King of Nanzhao ask when you already know the answer? Isn't it obvious? You are doing this for this little beauty?" The King of Nanzhao was somewhat unconvinced. The little girl before him was the princess of the Dechu state. She had nothing to do with the Northwest. Naturally, the King of Nanzhao did not believe that Princess Ding had spent so much effort to barge in for a completely unrelated princess. Although she is the princess of the Dechu state, she has no value to Emperor Chu. Emperor Chu has already gifted her to I. After thinking it over, the King of Nanzhao could only believe that Princess Ding wanted to capture Princess Changel to threaten the Emperor of the Dechu state. Who let the entire world know that the enmity between Prince Ding and Emperor Chu was as deep as the ocean? There is no need for the King of Nanzhao to worry about this. The King of Nanzhao only needs to tell this consort whether or not this consort can take Princess Changel away. Yi did not refute his words, indifferently replying. The King of Nanzhao sneered and said, "A beauty gifted by another. If the original consort I wants it, there is nothing wrong with that. However, the Princess of Nanzhao can come and go as she pleases. Do you think that there is no one in my Nanzhao?" I urged the Princess of Nanzhao to immediately lay down her weapon. For the sake of Prince Ding, I will not make things difficult for the Princess of Nanzhao. Otherwise, when the imperial bodyguards enter, it will not be so easy for the princess to escape. This King of Nanzhao is not as useless as he seems, Yi thought to herself. She smiled indifferently, "I'm afraid the guards won't have the chance to come in." Unknowingly, the sounds of fighting outside the door had gradually stopped. Originally, there was still a trace of pride on Nanzhao King's face, but he soon noticed that something was wrong. If the Nanzhao guards won, they would report it outside the hall no matter what. But at this moment, it was completely quiet outside the palace. Not even the slightest sound could be heard inside the palace. Nanzhao King's expression changed, and he said, "My Nanzhao royal palace has 1,000 guards, and Nanzhao capital city has 8,000 elites garrisoned. Do you think you can escape? I'm afraid those 8,000 elites won't have the time to enter the palace to protect you." Yi looked at the King of Nanzhao with a smile and said, "Has the King of Nanzhao forgotten about the important activities tonight?" Hearing this, Nanzhao King's heart skipped a beat, and his expression became even uglier. How could he have forgotten that Shu Manlin was going to make a move on Anshi tonight? He had secretly given Shu Manlin the token to mobilize the guards of King's City. If at this time it was all ready, Yi Li sighed softly and said, "There has been fighting in the palace for a long time, but other than the guards who were originally stationed in Nanzhao King's bedroom, no one came in to protect you." "Nanzhao King, why don't you guess where they went?" Nanzhao King had nothing to say. "Kill me or cut me up as you wish." Yi Li smiled and said, "How could this consort kill Nanzhao King?" "This consort just took away an unknown little girl from the Nanzhao royal palace. After tonight, presumably Princess Anxi will not care about this kind of thing with this consort. The friendship between Nanzhao and the Northwest will continue to flow." She said that Princess Anxi would not care, not Nanzhao King. Nanzhao King naturally understood the meaning. After tonight, Nanzhao King would no longer have the final say in the Nanzhao Kingdom. Nanzhao King gritted his teeth and said, "The Prince Ding mansion was invited by Anxi to help. It wasn't originally, but now it is." Yi Li was not afraid of offending Nanzhao King. Offending Nanzhao King would no longer have any impact on the relationship between Nanzhao and the Northwest. Because after tonight, no matter who won or lost, the real power of Nanzhao would have nothing to do with Nanzhao King. If Princess Anxi won, Princess Anxi, who had learned from the previous lesson, would no longer tolerate Shu Manlin and Nanzhao King. If Shu Manlin won, Nanzhao King would only become a puppet of Shu Manlin or Tan Jiji. Nanzhao King's mistake was that he chose to cooperate with Mo Jingqi. Perhaps Mo Jingqi really wanted to cooperate with Nanzhao King, but the people he sent, whether it was noble consort Lu or Prime Minister Lu, didn't seem to be helping Nanzhao King at all. This wicked girl. Nanzhao King gritted his teeth and cursed angrily. Yi Li frowned at Nanzhao King and said with some doubt, "This consort has a question that has been puzzling me. Princess Anxi is now the only princess under the name of Nanzhao King. And Princess Anxi is good at ruling the country and isn't attached to power. Nanzhao King should be happy to have such a daughter. Why is Nanzhao King helping Shu Manlin to target Princess Anxi?" Nanzhao King's support was definitely involved in making a holy girl, who should have been worshipped and had no real power, into a position that could threaten the life of the crown princess. Even if Shu Manlin was also Nanzhao King's daughter, even if Nanzhao King loved Shu Manlin more, he wouldn't hate Princess Anxi to this extent. Nanzhao King's face flashed with a trace of confusion. Clearly, he didn't understand Yi Li's question. How did he and his eldest daughter become like this today? He still remembered that Anxi was different from Shi Xia, who liked to dance and sing since childhood. She had a straightforward personality and was very calm in her actions. When she was only 13 or 14 years old, she was able to help him deal with the state affairs. She had accepted many of the matters that he himself had been troubled by, and she would handle them properly. At that time, he only thanked the heavens for giving him such a smart daughter. Even if he didn't have a prince, he had no regrets. So he made Anxi the crown princess and watched as Anxi worked hard to govern the country step by step and received the support of the people. But he didn't know when it started, but the joy and relief at the beginning gradually changed. Every time he saw the people show reverence and respect when they saw his daughter, he inexplicably felt displeased. He worked hard to govern the country for decades, but the people always said that this was not good. Even when they saw him, they feared and obeyed him, avoiding reverence and love. Why could his daughter so easily obtain something that he couldn't get in his life? Looking at Nanzhao King's changing expression, Yi Li felt that she already understood. Because of jealousy, not because he was worried about Princess Anxi usurping power, nor because he loved Shu Manlin more. It was just jealousy. A father was jealous of his daughter's ability to govern the country and the support of the people, so he did everything he could to make problems for his daughter. He even allowed others to kill her and added fuel to the fire. Yi Li shook her head and looked at Nanzhao King. If Princess Anxi is really defeated, how will Nanzhao succeed? Nanzhao King, have you really thought it through? The Nanzhao King's expression was ferocious, his breathing gradually becoming hurried. At this moment, Yi Li released the Nanzhao King and walked over to Princess Chang'e, who had already stood up. Softly laughing, she said, "Princess, let's go." Princess Chengel glanced somewhat cautiously at the Nanzhao king, not knowing what he was thinking. His expression was ferocious and distorted, but it was as if he did not see them. Yili smiled and said, "There's no need to worry. Let's go." Pulling Princess Chengel along, she walked out of the palace hall. Chapter 525. Outside the palace hall, the imperial bodyguards who had been guarding the sleeping quarters and those who had rushed over upon hearing the commotion had all been dealt with. However, there were still 7 or 8 survivors from the other group. Qin Feng and Zhuo Jing stood at the doorway, waiting for Yili to emerge. "Princess." As soon as the two emerged, the leader of the survivors immediately rushed forward. However, Zhuo Jing stepped forward and pulled him back. That person promptly replied, "Princess. Princess, are you all right? This subordinate is incompetent. I was unable to rescue the princess earlier." Princess Chengel hesitated. After looking at him for a long time, she asked, "You are Imperial Bodyguard Yang?" The man pulled down the veil covering his face, revealing a resolute and somewhat familiar face. Yili frowned. After thinking for a moment, she recalled that this was the commander of the Imperial bodyguards in the Empress Palace. Yili said, "Let's leave the palace first." Imperial bodyguard Yang clearly recognized Yili. Deferentially, he said, "Many thanks to Princess for your assistance." The party exited the palace. As expected, they did not encounter any obstructions along the way. The plaza outside the palace gates was still lively and jubilant. However, if one looked carefully, they would discover that the people who should have been there were no longer there. Without any delay, Yili and her entourage returned to the relay station. Before they could ask any questions, Imperial bodyguard Yang knelt on the ground in front of Princess Chengel, stating, "This subordinate is incompetent and has given the princess a fright. This is the antidote. Princess, please take it quickly." From his sleeve, he withdrew a small green porcelain bottle and presented it to Princess Chengel. Frowning, Yili asked, "Princess, you have been poisoned?" Along the way, Princess Chengel's expression was normal. There were no abnormalities in her body. There were no signs of poisoning. Princess Chengel hesitated for a moment before nodding her head. Imperial bodyguard Yang spoke with grief and indignation, "If not for that vicious woman poisoning the princess, how could we have saved the princess so late? Only that vicious woman has this poison. As soon as we saved the princess, she would immediately destroy the antidote. As a result, we could only try to obtain the antidote before we could save the princess. This was why the princess was sent to the palace." "Noble consort Lu?" Yili asked, "How did you get the antidote?" Bodyguard Yang said, "That vicious woman sent the princess into the palace and thought that the antidote was dispensable. But even so, 7 or 8 of our brothers still died to get the antidote. Fortunately, we made it in time, otherwise, even if we were to die 10,000 times, we would not have the face to face the Empress and the old Duke." Yili raised her eyebrows and said, "Did the Empress send you to save the princess?" Imperial bodyguard Yang sternly replied, "That's only natural. Every single one of your subordinates is Her Majesty the Empress's trusted aide and has received Her Majesty's grace. There were also a few brothers who had received Duquois favor in the past. Originally, we wanted to make a move on the road, but we couldn't get the antidote. We also didn't dare to rashly take the princess's life. This subordinate thanks Wang Fei for her help." Hearing news of her imperial mother, Princess Chengel's face was already covered in tears. Holding the medicine bottle, she promptly asked, "How is my imperial mother?" Imperial bodyguard Yang hesitated for a moment before replying, "Her Majesty the Empress. When this subordinate left the capital, Her Majesty the Empress was still under house arrest in the palace. However, please be at ease, Princess. The old Duke has already made arrangements. Her Majesty the Empress has also said that even if she is not free, His Majesty will ensure her safety for the sake of face. I only ask that Princess not return to the Chu capital in the future. This is something that Her Majesty the Empress entrusted this subordinate to give to Princess." Imperial bodyguard Yang then handed over a small, exquisite, and ordinary wooden box. Princess Changel stared blankly. Opening the box, she saw that it was only about 1 cun wide and 4 or 5 cun long. Opening the box, she saw several banknotes folded inside. On top of the banknotes, there was an exquisite, gorgeous hairpin and 7 or 8 luminous pearls. Although she did not see the denomination of the banknotes, she could tell from the luminous pearls that any one of them would be enough for Princess Changel to live the rest of her life without worry. Princess Ding. Imperial Mother doesn't want me anymore? Princess Changel asked in a low voice as she held the box. Yi Li sighed softly. Your Imperial Mother is doing this for your own good. Princess Changel had not been sent for a political marriage. Rather, she had been given to the king of Nanzhao by Imo Jingqi. This meant that in the future, Princess Changel would never be able to appear before the Chu capital and the common people as a princess. Otherwise, when the time came, since Imo Jingqi was able to harden his heart and give his daughter to the king of Nanzhao, he would naturally be able to harden his heart and take her life. I know. Princess Changel said as she held the wooden box. However, she could not help but begin to sob. Henceforth, she would no longer be the Princess Changel of the Dechu state. Presumably, her imperial father would soon have someone spread the news that Princess Changel had passed away from illness. Henceforth, she would no longer be able to see her imperial mother and maternal grandfather. She could only wander the outside world without a name or surname. Seeing Princess Changel's sorrowful appearance, Yi Li reached out and stroked her hair, saying, Good child, don't be sad. When the matters in the southern border are settled, why don't you come with us to the northwest? Princess Changel hesitated for a moment before refusing Yi Li's proposal. Many thanks, Princess Ding. However, my status is inconvenient. I fear that I will bring trouble to you and Uncle Prince Ding. Yi Li smiled and said, You have even broken into the Nanzhao Palace. How can that be considered trouble? When I return, I will have someone take a look at this antidote. Princess, please rest well. As for the rest, wait for your Uncle Prince Ding to return. No one dares to casually break in here. Imperial bodyguard Yang was delighted to hear Yi Li's words. What the Empress and the old Duke were most worried about was Princess Changel living alone outside. Although they had made arrangements to secretly protect the princess, in this chaotic world, who could confidently say that anywhere was safe except for the northwest? Originally, they had planned to secretly send the princess to the northwest to live in anonymity. With Princess Ding's invitation, it was naturally better for the princess. This subordinate thanks Princess Ding on behalf of the Empress and the old Duke. Waving her hand, Yi Li stated, Our prince respects the Empress as his elder sister. Duke of Hua has watched the prince grow up. The eldest young miss of the Hua family is this consort's good friend. Princess Changel is naturally not an outsider. Imperial bodyguard Yang expressed his thanks once more. Gazing at Yi Li, Princess Changel stated, I am no longer a princess. Imperial mother has given me the nickname Wuyo. Princess consort, please call me Wuyo. Wuyo was always happy. From this, it could be seen that the Empress loved her daughter dearly. Yi Li smiled and nodded. Okay. Wuyo must be tired. Return to your room and rest. Princess Changel nodded her head and followed the imperial bodyguard to the room that was still empty. As soon as the door was closed, Wuyo collapsed onto the bed and began to sob while biting the quilt. While she was sobbing, she did not know that the people outside the room were all people with exquisite internal energy. Naturally, they could hear her clearly. Yi Li turned her head to look at Feng Zhiyao, who was standing under the shadow of the nearby eaves, and sighed silently. Chapter 526. Seeing Yi Li walk out, Feng Zhiyao didn't hide anymore and walked out from under the eaves. These years, Yi Li more or less saw who Feng Zhiyao's heart was. Looking at Feng Zhiyao's usual carefree appearance, she could only sigh in her heart that the heavens were toying with people. In Yi Li's view, although Feng Zhiyao was a few years younger than Empress Hua, Compared to the sunglasses, Feng Xiao was definitely more like a good husband. It was a pity that the two were not fated to be together. Feng Xiao heard about Empress Hua's encounter and naturally couldn't calm down. Wang Fei, should we go to Wang Ye's side to take a look? Feng Xiao walked forward and asked calmly. Yi Li thought for a bit and nodded. Although she wasn't worried that Imo Xiaoyao would be injured, Xu Manlin had transferred hundreds of experts from the sacred ground of southern border. In addition, she had thousands of King's city guards under her control. It was still worrying if the result wasn't seen. At this time, Imo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen were sitting leisurely in the tallest restaurant in Nanzhao City, leisurely tasting wine. This restaurant was 3 stories high. Sitting on the top floor, one could overlook almost any place in the imperial city except for the imperial palace. At this time, sitting on the 3rd floor was not only Imo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen, but also Imo Jingli and Lei Tingfeng, who had disappeared from the square in front of the imperial palace, as well as Prime Minister Liu and noble consort Liu. Everyone was leisurely tasting wine while paying attention to the fights in the city. The noise in the square was too shocking. The people who were immersed in singing, dancing, and drinking didn't notice that the imperial city was already in a bloody storm. The masters were fighting in full swing, but the guests were sitting on the side drinking and watching. It didn't sound very interesting, but it was the best way to solve the problem at this time. The people on each side had inextricable relationships with the protagonists in this fight. Naturally, they didn't want the other side to get involved. Therefore, they could only drink and watch the show together. At the same time, they could also restrain the other party. Imo Xiaoyao leaned lazily against the window and carelessly played with the wine cup in his hand. He did not even bother to look outside, as though it had nothing to do with him who the Nanzhao royal power would be. Lin Han walked over to Imo Xiaoyao's side and whispered a few words. Imo Xiaoyao, who had originally looked indifferent, immediately perked up. Princess is fine. Lin Han nodded and said, yes, Princess is much better. He said that Prince hasn't gone back yet, so he'll come over to take a look later. Imo Xiaoyao glanced downstairs and said regretfully, I want to go back quickly, but it seems that I can't. Go and invite Princess Consort to come and sit. Everyone finally understood. Prince Ding had been listless all this time because Princess Ding was not present. With this thought, everyone present had different expressions. Some were angry, some were contemplative, and some were jealous. In less than a quarter of an hour, Yi Li appeared at the top of the stairs. Seeing that there were no other customers on the 3rd floor, only the envoys from the various countries sitting at a table, she raised her eyebrows in surprise. As soon as Imo Xiaoyao saw Yi Li, he immediately got up and walked over. Li, how are you? Yi Li nodded and said, everything is fine. Big brother is also here? Su Qingchen nodded and pointed out the window. Li, come and take a look. In fact, no matter how high the restaurant was, it was still night time and they couldn't really see anything. Everyone was waiting here motionlessly because they were waiting for the final result and to prevent the other party from interfering. Yi Li casually glanced outside and lost interest. Big brother, what's going on? Su Qingchen smiled faintly. The Saintess of Nanjiang suddenly sent people to attack the tribal leaders who came to attend the wedding. Princess Anqi naturally wanted to ask her for an explanation and then they started fighting. Of course, things were not as simple as Su Qingchen said. The tribal leaders that Xu Manlin sent people to attack were all supporters of Princess Anqi. Among them were Princess Anqi's in-laws and grandparents. When Princess Anqi received the news and went to help, she intercepted and killed the newlyweds midway. Princess Anqi had always won the hearts of the people. Naturally, she had a large number of loyal subordinates. Therefore, the two sides began to fight without giving way. Princess Ding, who do you think will win between Princess Anqi and the Saintess of Nanjiang? Mo Jingli suddenly asked. Everyone immediately looked at Yi Li. Yi Li calmly looked at Mo Jingli and saw that he was staring at her with a hint of provocation in his eyes. Yi Li only found it funny and said calmly, who wins and who loses is up to me. But there is a good saying, the world belongs to the one who wins the hearts of the people. Who is right and who is wrong is the matter of the Nanzhao royal family and the people. It has nothing to do with us outsiders. Princess Anqi had been ruling the country well and had greatly benefited the people. She was not someone who could be easily shaken by Xu Manlin's title as the so-called savior of Nanjiang. As long as Princess Anqi won tonight, her position in Nanzhao would not be easily shaken. Yi Li glanced at Imo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and did not look worried at all. Yi Li could not help but calm down. The world belongs to the one who wins the hearts of the people. Everyone was thinking about this in their hearts. Li Er's words are incisive. Su Qingchen praised with a smile. Yi Li was a little embarrassed. What she said was just a common saying from her previous life. Imo Xiaoyao smiled proudly and said, Li's words are naturally reasonable. Su Qingchen disdained to argue with this proud and childish man, not to mention that he was speaking well of Li Er. She pretended not to see his proud face. Everyone present was not an ignorant youth who did not know the world. They all had different opinions about Yi Li's words. But there was one person who was dissatisfied and said coldly, according to Miss Ye's words, the world belongs to the one who wins the hearts of the people. Doesn't that mean that the Dechu state's royal family should have already given up the throne to the Ding manor? Compared to the hearts of the people, although the Dechu state's royal family was the rightful ruler of the Dechu state, they could not compare to the Ding manor. Everyone looked strangely at noble consort Lu. Their eyes were full of mockery and disdain. It was clearly an incisive statement, but this woman could twist it like this. Should they say that noble consort Lu and Imo Jingqi were husband and wife? Actually, noble consort Lu knew something was wrong as soon as she said it. She didn't want to say anything. She just saw that Yi Li's casual words were highly praised by young Master Qingchen. She also saw the surprised and envious eyes of everyone present. She also saw Imo Xiaoyao holding Yi Li's arm with a proud expression. It was as if he was happier than her being praised. She couldn't help but feel a throbbing pain in her heart. She spat out harsh words without thinking. Yi Li looked at noble consort Lu calmly and said, Noble consort Lu's words, does it mean that you admit that the current royal family is not what the people want? Since noble consort Lu knows, you should scrupulously abide by the inner curtain and advise the emperor to diligently cultivate his virtue. You shouldn't speculate and talk nonsense here. My Northwestly city has nothing to do with your Dechu state. Even if noble consort Lu feels that Emperor Chu is incompetent and unworthy of the throne and wants to abdicate the throne, it has nothing to do with our prince. Chapter 527. After speaking, her gaze calmly swept across Imo Jingli's face. As expected, she saw Imo Jingli's expression change slightly. Imo Jingli showed a rare smile on his cold face, which made people feel uncomfortable. So noble concubine Lu thinks that my brother doesn't deserve to be the emperor? I didn't know until now that you are such a noble concubine. It's really an eye-opener. What nonsense are you talking about? Noble concubine Lu glared at Imo Jingli. Imo Jingli even respected Imo Jingqi because of his mood these years. How could he be afraid of noble concubine Lu? She sneered, wasn't it noble concubine Lu who said that? Your Highness. Prime Minister Lu looked at his daughter with displeasure. Although he could keep some thoughts to himself, what noble concubine Lu said was too much. It was not the time for them to offend Prince Ding. Obviously, the bottom line of not offending Prince Ding was Princess Ding. Offending Princess Ding was more important than offending Prince Ding. However, his daughter couldn't see the situation clearly. She talked nonsense and challenged Princess Ding's bottom line. Your Highness just made a slip of the tongue. Prince Li, please be careful. Imo Jingli snorted disdainfully. A slip of the tongue? It was not the first time for him to know noble concubine Lu. She was always arrogant, as if everyone in the world only deserved to be the dust under her feet. Imo Jingli didn't doubt that she looked down on her brother and thought that he didn't deserve to be the emperor. While Mo Jingli and noble concubine Lu were quarreling, Mo Xiaoyao was pouring tea for Yili attentively and saying sweet words to Yili without any scruples. It almost blinded the eyes of all the unloved people on the scene. Lei Tingfeng looked at the two of them thoughtfully and said with a smile, "Prince Ding and Princess Ding's relationship is really good. It really makes me envious." Even if they had a good relationship, there was no need to show it in public, right? Mo Xiaoyao nodded in agreement. As the saying goes, one should marry a virtuous wife. As a man, having a good wife is of utmost importance. For those who were lucky, for example, I married Mr. Li. Those who are unlucky. Mo Xiaoyao didn't finish his sentence, but everyone understood what he meant. However, they all had their own choices for the unlucky person. Everyone looked at Yi Li at the same time. They couldn't help but admit that Mo Xiaoyao was indeed lucky. Princess Ding. Princess Ding was not only beautiful and had a natural temperament, but she was also good at governing the country. Nowadays, the most feared Qilin in the northwest was trained by Princess Ding. The fourth and fifth sons of the Su family led the people in the north to cultivate wastelands and plant farmland. It was said that it was Princess Ding's idea to bring the originally barren north to a peaceful and happy life. Even without these, just the fact that Ding Wangfei had Su Hongyu and Su Hongyan's two uncles, as well as that fifth brother's cousin, if people knew that the Su family valued Yili this much, it was likely that all the men in the world would fight to marry this beauty. Ever since Mo Xiaoyao and Yili got married, Mo Xiaoyao, who was originally living in seclusion in the Prince Ding mansion with a crippled leg and a disfigured face, had managed to rule the northwest in just a few years. He was healthy and even had a son. What kind of luck was this? In this process, Mo Xiaoyao had only paid the price of a head of white hair. More importantly, ever since his hair turned white, Mo Xiaoyao seemed to have become even more dazzling. Even Yili blushed at Mo Xiaoyao's shameless words. Her face was as calm as water, but she secretly pinched his waist mercilessly. Mo Xiaoyao's face immediately fell. Wife, seeing that the two were getting more and more out of hand, Su Qingchen coughed lightly to remind them that there were still outsiders around. Yili was too lazy to pay attention to Mo Xiaoyao's antics. She looked at the place where the fighting was still going on and asked, "Xu Manlin has mobilized the Nanzhao city guards?" Su Qingchen nodded slightly and smiled. "Leave her, don't worry. Princess Anxi is not a weak woman who can be bullied." The tribes that came to the wedding this time, including the Pu family and Princess Anxi's grandfather's family, all brought many people. Sitting by the window, Mo Jingli stared at a certain place for a long time. Suddenly, he turned around and shouted at Mo Xiaoyao, "There! Mo Xiaoyao, you didn't keep your word." Mo Xiaoyao lazily leaned his head on Yi Li's shoulder and glanced at Mo Jingli with a puzzled expression. "What do you mean?" Mo Jingli sneered. "You dare say that those people are not from the northwest? Not Qilin?" Hearing his words, the others immediately stood up and walked to the window to take a closer look. Sure enough, they saw a group of people cutting through the chaos like a hot knife through butter. Wherever they went, they were invincible. Even in the dark, they could clearly see the astonishing speed at which they were advancing. Even if the enemy was several times stronger than them, they could not stop them at all. Everyone looked at Mo Xiaoyao. Apart from the Northwest and Qilin, no one else had that kind of fighting power. "Oh, we've been discovered. Li, what should we do?" Mo Xiaoyao did not shirk away. He blinked innocently and looked at Yi Li. Yi Li could not help but smile. It was now dark. Even if Xu Manlin had thousands of people in her hands. If Qilin did not want to be discovered, he would not have revealed himself. This was clearly Mo Xiaoyao's intention. Was he supporting Princess Anxi? Mo Jingli said angrily, "Mo Xiaoyao, we agreed that no one could interfere in Nanjiang's affairs. You're clearly breaking the agreement." Mo Xiaoyao scornfully curled his lips. "I did break the agreement. What do you want? Bite me?" Clearly reading the meaning of Mo Xiaoyao's expression, Mo Jingli's facial muscles could not help but twitch. Lei Tingfeng still had some sense. He did not intend to interfere in Nanjiang's affairs. Nanzhao and Xiling shared a large area of land. For many years, there had been friction and they could not be friends. Genom of Gojoseon already had some plans. If he could not break into the Dechu state in the short term, then he would start with Nanzhao. Therefore, it did not matter to him who had Nanzhao in their hands. Prince Ding, since we have an agreement, you should give us a reasonable explanation for acting rashly? Lei Tingfeng said politely. Mo Xiaoyao smiled. Explanation? It's nothing. Of course, it's because I promised you before I promised Princess Anqi. Moreover, I did not intend to interfere in Nanjiang's affairs. It's just that Princess Anqi suspected that someone would take advantage of the wedding to cause trouble. She asked I for a few guards to protect the newlyweds and the wedding guests. Princess Anqi and young Master Qingchen are best friends. She is also quite close to Ai's beloved concubine. How can I not agree to such a small matter? Also, I did not give it to you for free. Princess Anqi asked I to lend each guard 5,000 taels of silver. If they were injured or killed in battle, they would have to pay another 500 taels of silver for medical expenses or 10,000 taels of silver as compensation. This is a fair and cost-effective deal. I can do it even if we are not friends. Hearing this, everyone silently vomited blood in their hearts. Yi Li was thoughtful. She did not expect Mo Xiaoyao to have understood the essence of mercenary army. Speaking of which, if Qi Lin became a mercenary army, not only could they make a lot of money, but more importantly, they could have a lot of opportunities for actual combat. After all, the Northwest had been too peaceful in recent years. No amount of training could compare to the effect of actual combat. Of course, this was just Yi Li's imagination. She could not turn the well-trained Qi Lin into a mercenary army. What is Li thinking? Mo Xiaoyao asked in a low voice when he saw Yi Li lowering her head and thinking. He knew that she must have some plans in mind. Yi Li shook her head and said, "Let's talk about it later." Mo Xiaoyao also knew that this was not the place to talk. He glanced at the people who were intentionally or unintentionally glancing in their direction. He stood up openly and hugged Yi Li to stand by the window to watch the battle. Yi Li had undergone special training and Mo Xiaoyao had profound skills. The two of them naturally had better night vision than the people present. Looking at the performance of the Qi Lin in the distance, Yi Li nodded with satisfaction. The 5 years of training were not in vain. The Qi Lin members were basically mature and experienced. They could completely carry out different kinds of missions on their own. Mo Xiaoyao pointed in the distance and said, "Shu Manlin's people have begun to attack the princess residence." Yi Li frowned and said, "At this time, Princess Anqi should not be in the princess residence, right?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "Of course not. Is she waiting to die in the princess residence at this time?" Princess Anqi probably did not expect that her father would give the token to Shu Manlin to mobilize the guards in the city. Facing 7,000 to 8,000 soldiers and hundreds of masters, even with Mo Xiaoyao's support, Qi Lin could only avoid the attack. It was impossible for them to fight head-on. After all, Mo Xiaoyao did not bring many people to Nanjiang. It was impossible for him to mobilize all the forces of the Prince Ding mansion in Nanjiang for Princess Anqi. "Li, do you want to guess where Princess Anqi is now?" Mo Xiaoyao asked cheerfully. Everyone, except Su Qingchen, pricked up their ears to listen to the conversation. Yi Li frowned and stared at the scene outside for a long time before slowly saying, "To catch the bandits, first catch the leader." Princess Anqi was not in the princess residence at this time. Naturally, she could not fight in the city. Then they could only go find Shu Manlin. Only by getting the token in Shu Manlin's hand could they stop the killing in the city. The guards in Nanzhao city only listened to the chief and did not recognize the person. Without the token, even the king of Nanzhao might not be able to do anything. Where is Shu Manlin? Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li with a smile and said, "Of course she is in the Nanzhao palace. That woman wants to be the king of Nanzhao so badly. If she is not in the palace, where else can she be? Yi Li frowned slightly. The king of Nanzhao was still in the palace. Although there were people left behind to deal with the aftermath, if they were not careful, they might not be able to find the king of Nanzhao so quickly. However, if Shu Manlin found the king of Nanzhao first, it would not be good for Princess Anqi. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, Li, don't worry. It would be good if the king of Nanzhao knows his place. If he still wants to rely on Shu Manlin, I'm afraid, he will be in big trouble. Don't forget to stay by Shu Manlin's side. Yi Li understood. Shu Manlin still had Tan Jiji by her side. He was not someone easy to deal with. If Shu Manlin won, Tan Jiji would never let the king of Nanzhao live. If the king of Nanzhao died, Shu Manlin's position would be unstable. Chapter 528. Yi Li had fallen asleep in Mo Xiaoyao's arms when Princess Anqi sent someone to invite the distinguished guests into the palace. Although it was a bit depressing that they had to enter the palace to discuss matters instead of going back to rest, no one present would say no. Everyone knew that Princess Anqi was the final winner of this battle. Naturally, everyone present wanted to enter the palace as soon as possible to win more benefits for themselves. Mo Xiaoyao wanted to let Yi Li go back to rest, but Yi Li remembered that the king of Nanzhao was still hidden somewhere in the palace, so she decided to enter the palace again. It was still the same hall where the king of Nanzhao had received them, but the people in the hall had changed. Princess Anqi was still wearing her wedding gown with white flowers and blue flowers. However, the gown was stained with dark red blood, which made her look even colder and more murderous under the light. At this time, Princess Anqi was standing in the hall, looking down at Shu Manlin, who was sitting in the middle of the hall in a sorry state. It's so late. It's really rude of me to invite you into the palace. Princess Anqi nodded to Yi Li, and then apologized to the people who entered the hall. Lei Tengfeng said with a smile, Don't be so polite, princess. It happened so suddenly tonight. I'm relieved to see that you and your wife are safe. Pu Ah stood behind Princess Anqi. There were still some blood stains on his young face. Obviously, both he and Princess Anqi had gone through a tough battle tonight. Princess Anqi said with a smile, Thank you for your concern, Crown Prince of Genom King Gojoseon. Prime Minister Lu frowned, Why didn't the king of Nanzhao come out when such a big thing happened? Princess Anqi also frowned, saying, To be honest, I didn't see my father after returning to the palace. He's sending people to look for him. Shu Manlin, the tokens of the guards of Yunwu City and the guards of the palace are in your hands. Where is my father? Shu Manlin's face darkened. She said coldly, How do I know where he is? Princess Anqi sneered, The tokens are in your hands. How do you not know where my father is? Then how did you get the token? Shu Manlin was stunned, but soon understood what Princess Anqi meant. She wanted to put the blame on her for the disappearance of the king of Nanzhao. Regarding this matter, Shu Manlin was really wronged. She had never thought that she couldn't defeat Princess Anqi with all the masters of the sacred land of Nanjiang and the guards of Yunwu City. Originally, she had hoped to kill Princess Anqi directly. As long as Princess Anqi was dead, her subordinates would be defenseless. Who would have thought that she would be surrounded by a group of extremely powerful guards? Not to mention killing her, she was caught red-handed by Princess Anqi when she broke into the Saint Ladies' Hall. What do you mean? The command medallion was naturally given to me by the king. Shu Manlin said sternly. Princess Anqi wasn't in a hurry. She smiled faintly and said, Father will give you both the Imperial Guard token and the Guard token of the Royal City? Are you joking? Shu Manlin was a little uneasy. Normally, the king of Nanzhao wouldn't give her such an important thing. But this time, she used some special methods to bewitch the king of Nanzhao into giving her the tokens. But no matter how she said it was the king of Nanzhao who gave her the tokens, no one would believe her. Everyone present was a tyrant with great power in their hands. Naturally, they understood the importance of power and military power. As the king of Nanzhao, How could he give such an important thing to a holy maiden so easily? Even if someone believed it, now that she had lost, if the king of Nanzhao didn't appear in time to save her, the truth would become a lie. But, where was the king of Nanzhao now? Of course, Xu Manlin didn't know that when she led most of the guards to besiege Princess Anqi, someone had sneaked into the palace to save the princess. Before leaving, the person had knocked out the king of Nanzhao and hid him. If she knew, she wouldn't have taken so many people with her. So no one in the palace knew the whereabouts of the king of Nanzhao. Princess Anqi looked down at Xu Manlin, who was in a sorry state but still refused to admit defeat. A trace of disgust flashed through her eyes. She was really tired of this woman. Over the years, she had come to understand Xu Manlin's true identity. So in the beginning, when Xu Manlin targeted her from time to time, she tolerated her. However, she didn't expect that Xu Manlin would become more and more excessive. What saddened her the most was that her father actually gave Xu Manlin the token of the guards of King City. Could it be that her father didn't think that Xu Manlin could kill her if he had the authority to mobilize the guards of King City? Or, did her father think so himself? Xu Manlin, you mobilized the palace and palace guards without permission, attacked the princess's residence, and tried to kill the crown princess of Nanzhao. Also, you can't absolve yourself from the blame for my father's disappearance. Do you know your crime? Princess Anqi took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice. Xu Manlin was speechless. She sneered, now that you've won, you should be happy. Say whatever you want. Anqi, don't pretend. You're the one who held the king hostage and framed me. Princess Anqi didn't get angry. She smiled indifferently and said, don't you know I's whereabouts very well tonight? I didn't even have the chance to get close to the palace when you were surrounded by so many soldiers. Also, weren't you the one who took away nearly half of the palace guards? The palace guards bear the important responsibility of protecting the palace and the king of Nanzhao. Even during wartime, they can't be taken away at will. Xu Manlin, do you still not know your crime? Xu Manlin knew she couldn't win against Princess Anqi. She was too complacent and careless. Originally, she thought that no matter how capable Princess Anqi was, she couldn't escape from the encirclement of thousands of guards and hundreds of experts. So when she did these things, she didn't think about hiding at all. Now that she had lost, there was no way she could turn things around. King Li. Xu Manlin had no choice but to place her hopes on the people present. Among them, the one she was closest to was naturally Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli didn't show as much tenderness as Xu Manlin imagined. He glanced at Xu Manlin indifferently and said coldly, I have no right to interfere in Nanzhao's national affairs. Xu Manlin was stunned. She didn't expect Mo Jingli to be so heartless. King Li, what a heartless person. Don't forget, if it wasn't for me. Come, take her away. Princess Anqi said. 2 guards from the princess residence immediately came forward and covered Xu Manlin's mouth. They dragged her away. Nanzhao was in chaos now. It wasn't the time to offend King Li. As for the deal between Xu Manlin and King Li, she would find a way to find out later. After dealing with Xu Manlin's matter, Princess Anqi apologized to everyone again before sending them out of the palace to rest. Prince Ding, Princess Ding, please wait a moment. Princess Anqi called out to Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao who were walking at the back. Yi Li turned to look at her and raised her eyebrows. Princess Anqi said with a smile, where is Imperial Father now? Princess, please tell me. Yi Li smiled and said, he's in the bedchamber. Princess, you can send people to look for him carefully. Oh right, I took someone out of Nanzhao's palace. Please forgive me. Princess Anqi waved her hand and said with a smile, it's a small matter. Princess, please don't mind. Yi Li smiled and said, thank you, Princess. Goodbye. Chapter 529. Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao walked out hand in hand. Su Qingchen was the last to leave. She stopped after a few steps and turned back to look at Princess Anshi. Princess Anshi asked, Qingchen, do you have anything else to say? Su Qingchen glanced indifferently at Pu Ah who was standing behind Princess Anshi. Princess Anshi pursed her lips and smiled, Pu Ah is one of us. Qingchen, if you have anything to say, just say it. After this night, Princess Anshi and her new husband obviously trusted each other more and were closer to each other. Su Qingchen didn't stand on ceremony and asked, Princess, what are your plans after finding the king of Nanzhao? Plans? Princess Anshi didn't understand. Su Qingchen said carefully, after what happened tonight, the king of Nanzhao will hold a grudge against you no matter what. Princess, have you not considered the future? Will the king of Nanzhao intervene to save Shu Manlin after he comes out? Or even support a second or third Shu Manlin? Princess Anshi's expression was a little gloomy. She lowered her eyes and said, he is my father. Su Qingchen said calmly, I didn't ask you to do anything to the king of Nanzhao. Princess Anshi was a little ashamed. She looked at Su Qingchen and smiled bitterly. She admitted generously, it was I who wanted to do something to my father. Qingchen. I've had enough of these years. Can you help me? Looking at the exhausted Princess Anshi who sat weakly on the steps, Su Qingchen sighed softly. He said indifferently, the king of Nanzhao was frightened and seriously ill. He can't take charge of the court. Since Princess Anshi is married, you can ascend to the throne, right? Princess Anshi was startled. Although she had thought of weakening her father's power, she had never thought of becoming the king of Nanzhao before her father passed away. Su Qingchen looked at her calmly and said, you and I have known each other for so many years. We have often discussed how to rule a country. Princess Anshi nodded and said, yes, I have learned a lot from knowing Qingchen. Su Qingchen said, I have taught you how to rule a country, but I have never taught you how to rule a country. Anshi, this is the last time I will teach you. Do you know why you have always been suppressed by Shu Manlin all these years? Because you lack ruthlessness. Being an emperor was a lonely path. Tactics, strategy, and decisiveness were all indispensable. What you lack the most is ruthlessness. Since ancient times, emperors have been heartless, and the royal family has no flesh and blood. Every time you show mercy, the enemy will only rise again in return. You are cruel enough to yourself, so you can endure any kind of hardship, but you are too kind to the people around you. Anshi, when you can truly handle the relationship with the people around you, you will become a qualified king. After saying that, Su Qingchen didn't stay any longer and walked out of the door. Princess Anshi suddenly asked, what about Prince Ding? Everyone in the world knows that Prince Ding dotes on Princess Consort very much. He also trusts Lady Su a lot. Does Qingchen think that Prince Ding is a qualified king? Su Qingchen turned to look at him and smiled faintly. There is no one more suitable than Prince Ding in the world. There was another condition for becoming a king, and that was to learn how to make choices. Prince Ding knows what he wants and what he should do, so I have never been worried about him. Anshi. King of Nanzhao, take care. Seeing Su Qingchen turn and leave without any reluctance, Princess Anshi faced the empty hall and felt a chill in her heart. She couldn't help but hold her knees and lower her head as tears fell silently. The sparkling tears fell on her knees and soon soaked her white clothes. Pu Ah walked to Princess Anshi's side and squatted down. Looking at the woman holding her knees and crying silently on the ground, a trace of heartache flashed in his eyes. He clumsily raised his hand and patted Princess Anshi's shoulder, saying softly, I'll stay with you. Princess Anshi raised her head and stared blankly at his stiff face. Finally, she couldn't help but lean into his arms. Her sobs echoed in the hall. When Su Qingchen walked out of the palace, the sky was already slightly bright. There were still 2 or 3 drunk people wandering in the square in front of the palace. They hadn't gone home yet. A gust of wind blew. Su Qingchen looked at the setting moon and let out a long sigh. What's wrong with Master Qingchen? You look so sad. A faint smile came from behind him. Qingchen frowned unhappily. What did it mean to look sad? When he came back to his senses, he saw Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao standing behind him and looking at him. The difference was that Yi Li looked worried, while Mo Xiaoyao looked teasing and gloating. Su Qingchen said lightly, I thought you had already returned to the post house to rest. Aren't you tired after a day and night? Yi Li said softly, we were a little worried when we saw Big Brother lagging behind. Although it's okay now, it was a mess last night. It's better to go back together. Seeing Yi Li's worried eyes, Su Qingchen's heart warmed. What he had just said to Princess Anxi was not just to guide her on how to be a queen or how to deal with the future. It was also to tell her that from now on, their former friendship had become a thing of the past. Even though they both ruled Nanzhao, the status of the king of Nanzhao and the crown princess was completely different. After Princess Anxi ascended the throne, the whole of Nanzhao became a responsibility that she could never get rid of. It was impossible for there to be such a simple friendship between them. Su Qingchen did not have many friends, but he was more like a teacher and a friend to Princess Anxi. Although he was gratified by Princess Anxi's growth, he could not help but feel disappointed that he would lose a close friend. Well, let's go back together, Su Qingchen said with a faint smile. As he walked, he said to Mo Xiaoyao, we may need a few more days to return to the northwest. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and asked, why? Su Qingchen said, to attend Princess Anxi's ascension ceremony. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and could not help but praise, Master Qingchen, you're a good man. I am tired of looking at the king of Nanzhao. It's not bad to change to Princess Anxi. He was sure that before they left, Princess Anxi had no intention of ascending the throne. It must be Su Qingchen who stayed behind and said something to Princess Anxi. And this could only be said by Su Qingchen. Although they could all say it, Princess Anxi would only think that they had ulterior motives. If Su Qingchen said it, the effect would be completely different. Su Qingchen was silent. It might be a good thing for Princess Anxi to register in advance, but it might not be a good thing for Nanzhao. If the king of Nanzhao was left, with Princess Anxi's temperament, what happened last night might happen again. Although the king of Nanzhao was incompetent, there would still be people and tribes loyal to him. And with the help of Tan Jiji, who had not yet returned, Princess Anxi's life might be in danger if they counterattacked. But once Princess Anxi ascended the throne, the tribes might not be convinced in a short time. By then, there would be internal strife in Nanzhao, and West Hill would have the intention of annexing Nanzhao. Su Qingchen closed his eyes. He did not know if Princess Anxi would hate him in the future. But now, West Hill had been dormant for many years, and there were already signs of impatience. Once he joined forces with the northern tribes of Dechu State to set their sights on the northwest, it would be better to give him a chance to test his sword in Nanzhao, and give the northwest more time to prepare and buffer. Brother. Yi Li did not think as much as Su Qingchen. These power struggles were not her forte. But she could sense Su Qingchen's gloominess. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Su Qingchen and said, Princess Anxi is in the royal family. Unless she voluntarily gives up, she will never be able to escape these things. Brother, you don't have to blame yourself. Also, thank you. Mo Xiaoyao naturally understood Su Qingchen's considerations and plans, and thanked him sincerely. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, what are you thanking me for? It's my duty. Born in this world, it's up to fate. Let's go. It's time to go back and rest. Su Qingchen left Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li behind and headed for the post house. Yi Li looked at Su Qingchen's back and frowned. I feel that something is wrong with brother. Mo Xiaoyao held Yi Li's hand and comforted her softly. It's nothing. Princess Anxi will be the ruler of a country after she ascends the throne. With Master Qingchen's status, it's naturally inconvenient for him to be too close to her. Moreover, Princess Anxi is now a married woman. Master Qingchen has to avoid arousing suspicion. No one would be in a good mood without a close friend. Your brother has always been open-minded. he'll be fine after a few days. Yi Li nodded and sighed. I hope so. My brother became famous at a young age. There aren't many people who can get along with him. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at Su Qingchen, who was walking alone in front of them. A sly smile flashed in his eyes. He looked at Yi Li and said, Yi Li, speaking of which, we said that we could have fun on our way back. Now we have to stay for Princess Anqi's coronation and go back to take part in your military exercise. It seems that we don't have enough time. Yi Li blinked. What's Prince's plan? Yi Li had been familiar with Mo Xiaoyao's temperament over the past few years. His words clearly indicated that he already had a plan. Mo Xiaoyao smiled with satisfaction. He lowered his head and kissed Yi Li's lips. You know me best, Yi Li. We've already attended Princess Anqi's wedding. Why don't we? Yi Li understood that Mo Xiaoyao had no intention of attending the coronation. What do you want? Mo Xiaoyao said, your brother's presence is enough for the coronation. Who dares to say that young Master Qingchen's name isn't important enough? Let's travel slowly back to the northwest. What do you think, Yi Li? Young Master Qingchen was famous all over the world. More importantly, he represented the Su family. Behind the Su family was Princess Ding. Princess Ding was Prince Ding. Su Qingchen's participation in the coronation was enough to show the Northwest's attitude. Yi Li hesitated. She had to admit that she was a little tempted. She had been busy in the Northwest for the past few years. She had never really had the time to leisurely travel. Will Big Brother agree? Of course. Your brother will definitely be worried. He'll definitely wait until Princess Anqi's coronation before leaving. It's a waste of time for us to stay here. Then, okay. In the end, she couldn't resist the temptation of traveling. Yi Li could only feel sorry for her brother. Chapter 530. Mo Xiaoyao finally persuaded Su Qingchen to stay in Nanzhao to deal with the follow-up matters. Satisfied, he left Nanzhao with Yi Li and began to travel freely. Unlike Yi Li, Mo Xiaoyao did not feel guilty or worried about leaving Su Qingchen in Nanzhao. In fact, Mo Xiaoyao still thought that young Master Qingchen kept a low profile. In other words, he did not work hard. Young Master Qingchen became famous at a young age. He was once a talent valued by many great scholars. Unfortunately, since he resigned and traveled around, young Master Qingchen's name was more common in rural legends and Jianghu rumors. In the eyes of the world, young Master Qingchen's immortal charm was better than his strategic means. But Mo Xiaoyao knew that Su Qingchen's ability was not limited to this. At least half of Princess Anqi's achievements today were due to Su Qingchen. In the past few years, the southwest of Dechu State could be said to be sandwiched between West Hill and Nanzhao. Today's situation could not be achieved without Su Qingchen's cooperation. Perhaps they had learned the lesson of their predecessors who were in the limelight. The two generations of the Su family liked to keep a low profile and bide their time. In the development of the Northwest these few years, the Su family definitely deserved the most credit. But when people talked about it, they would only praise Prince Ding and his princess consort for being wise and rarely mentioned the Su family. It could be seen that the Su family had been rather successful. This also made Mo Xiaoyao very helpless. To keep a low profile, it would inevitably limit the performance of their talents. If these people worked hard obediently, how much time could he save to play with Ollie? In the post house, Su Qingchen sat alone behind the desk with his eyes closed. The words Mo Xiaoyao said before leaving still rang in his ears. Brother Qingchen, I dare not guarantee the prosperity of the Su family, but as long as I am alive and Mo Yuchen is alive, I will guarantee the peace of the Su family. Mo Xiaoyao rarely called Mo Xiaobao by his full name. Usually, he would just call him Mo Xiaobao. Some people who didn't know the inside story even thought that the little heir of the Prince Ding mansion was called Mo Xiaobao. Therefore, the sincerity and determination in Mo Xiaoyao's words could be seen. It wasn't that the Su family didn't trust Mo Xiaoyao, but rather, they didn't trust Wang Quan. For this reason, the Su family had paid a heavy price. Although it wasn't to the point where the entire Su family was exterminated and their blood flowed like a river, several generations of the Su family had been suppressed. Many of the family's descendants had failed to achieve their goals and died of depression. Even though his grandfather was a world-renowned scholar, when had he ever truly lived a carefree life? Sometimes, such a blunt knife was even more torturous than a direct cut. Young Master Qingchen. Outside the door, Qin Feng called out in a low voice. "What's the matter?" Su Qingchen opened her eyes. Her eyes were calm, without the slightest hint of sleepiness. Qin Feng said, "Prime Minister Liu of Dechu State, noble consort Liu, requests to see you." Su Qingchen pondered for a moment and said indifferently, "Let her in." After a while, Prime Minister Liu came in with noble consort Liu, who was dressed in white. Seeing the man in white sitting behind the desk with no intention of moving, Prime Minister Liu's turbid old eyes flashed a trace of jealousy and anger. He couldn't help but envy Su Qingchen. Young Master Qingchen was famous when he was young. Before he was 30, he had already held great power in his hands. Although young Master Qingchen didn't have a specific position in the Northwest, people who really paid attention knew that young Master Qingchen's position among the Northwest civil officials was second only to his father, Su Hongyu. Prime Minister Liu remembered that when he was young Master Qingchen's age, he still struggled hard in the imperial court and used all kinds of underhanded methods to climb up. How could Prime Minister Liu not envy and resent this elegant man in front of him? Like her father, noble consort Liu didn't like Su Qingchen. Not only because he was Yi Li's cousin, but also because she always felt ashamed in front of this man. It didn't mean that Su Qingchen was prettier than her. No matter how handsome Su Qingchen was, he was still a man. His appearance couldn't be more delicate and beautiful than noble consort Liu, who was known as the most beautiful woman in the Chu capital. Instead, it was the kind of temperament that Su Qingchen naturally showed, which always made people feel that the darkness and filth in their hearts couldn't hide in front of him. "Prime Minister Liu, why are you here?" Su Qingchen looked at the two people who were staring at him silently, frowned and asked. Prime Minister Liu came to himself and said, "I heard that Prince Ding and the princess have left the Nanzhao kingdom this morning." Su Qingchen nodded but didn't speak. Prime Minister Liu frowned and said, "What do Prince Ding and the princess think about the succession of Princess Anqi?" This morning, the news that the king of Nanzhao had been found spread in the palace. However, the king of Nanzhao was injured by the rebels and was too frightened to deal with the state affairs. In a few days, Princess Anqi would ascend the throne as the crown princess and become the new queen of Nanzhao. This kind of news was not a good thing for Great Chu. Princess Anqi and Su Qingchen had always been close, and had a good relationship with Ding Wangfei. If she ascended the throne, it would only be bad for the Dechu state. Su Qingchen said with a faint smile, "The prince has given me full authority to deal with this matter." Prime Minister Liu's face changed slightly. "You mean that you can represent Prince Ding?" Hearing this, Prime Minister Liu complained in his heart. When the emperor attacked the Su family, he had completely offended the Su family. Now Prince Ding had given this matter to Su Qingchen. Even if Su Qingchen wasn't Princess Anqi's friend, he wouldn't stand on their side. Su Qingchen said with a faint smile, "Since the king of Nanzhao can't deal with the state affairs, it's natural for Princess Anqi to ascend the throne as the crown princess. Even if the prince is here, what objection can he have? Prime Minister Liu, you and I just need to wait for Princess Anqi to ascend the throne on an auspicious day." Prime Minister Liu's face turned green and white. He just didn't want Princess Anqi to ascend the throne. Su Qingchen didn't look at Prime Minister Liu's face. He lowered his eyes and sipped the tea in his cup, hiding the disdain in his eyes. As a prime minister, he thought too highly of himself if he wanted to influence the succession of the throne of Nanzhao. "I still have some things to deal with, so I won't keep you company." This meant that he was going to serve tea and see the guest out. Prime Minister Liu's expression changed. Finally, he snorted and left. As soon as Prime Minister Liu left, Someone came to report that the Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon wanted to see him. Su Qingchen frowned and said, "Close the door. I won't see any guests today." The guard left to pass the order. Qin Feng sat aside and asked curiously, "Eldest young master, is it really okay to close the door and not see any guests?" Su Qingchen said with a smile, "What's the problem? It's just a matter of talking about those things. When Princess Anqi ascends the throne, they will have nothing to say." Even if people didn't want Princess Anqi, who had a good relationship with the Northwest, to ascend the throne, these people were all envoys, and there were no more than 100 people at most. Could it be that they had the ability to stop it? Su Qingchen picked up the pen and wrote a few lines. Then he calmly folded the paper and put it in an envelope, handing it to Qin Feng and saying, "Please send it to Princess Anqi." Qin Feng didn't ask more. He took the letter and turned to go out at once. An hour later, Su Qingchen's letter was unfolded on Princess Anqi's table. The elegant handwriting was full of hidden sharpness and murderous intent. "If you don't make up your mind, you'll be in trouble instead. In the way of the king, those who follow will prosper and those who oppose will die." Chapter 531. After looking at the letter for a long time, Princess Anqi asked, "Where is Shu Manlin?" The guard beside her replied, "Princess, she is locked up in the dungeon." Princess Anqi was silent for a moment and said, "Send her on her way. Send the tribal leaders who helped Shu Manlin on her way as well." "Yes, Princess." No matter how bloody the Nanzhao kingdom was, Yi Li and Imo Xiaoyao were enjoying a rare moment of relaxation. They did not bring any guards with them. They left Qin Feng, Zhuo Jing, and Feng San in Nanzhao to assist Su Qingchen. They only rode a wild horse that Imo Xiaoyao had just tamed. With some luggage, they left the Nanzhao kingdom and headed towards the northwest. In order not to be disturbed along the way, Imo Xiaoyao specially dyed his white hair, which he had been used to for several years, to black hair. After changing into ordinary clothes, the two of them really looked like a pair of immortal couples walking in the pugilistic world. Just when everyone thought that Prince Ding and Princess Ding would definitely rush back to the northwest, Imo Xiaoyao leisurely took Yi Li through the northwest border of Nanzhao and entered the West Hill. Hundreds of years ago, the West Hill and the Dechu state were one. So even after hundreds of years, the language and customs of the people of the two countries did not change much. Imo Xiaoyao and Yi Li just disguised themselves and sneaked into the West Hill border. They did not arouse any suspicion along the way. The two of them were important figures that involved the entire Northwest. Usually, no matter where they went, they were surrounded by attendants. When had they ever been at ease? This time, the two of them did not bring any guards. They traveled in light carriages and toured the mountains and rivers. Even if they did not deliberately visit any famous mountains, rivers, or holy places, they still felt very free and happy. Imo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li's relaxed eyebrows and the faint but relaxed smile on her face. He felt very guilty. Over the years, Li's pressure was no less than that of anyone in the Northwest, perhaps even more. All of this was because of him. If she hadn't married him, it would have been easy for Li to live any kind of life she wanted. But because he was trapped in the Northwest, dealing with endless political affairs and facing enemies that seemed to be as many as the world. This was definitely not the life he wanted for Li. He wanted Li to become the most honorable and happiest woman in the world. He wanted her to be able to do whatever she wanted and go wherever she wanted. Sitting in a corner of the inn, Yi Li looked up at Imo Xiaoyao, who was lost in thought, and asked softly, "What are you thinking about?" Imo Xiaoyao blinked. He looked at Yi Li and whispered, "Li, do you like your current life?" Yi Li raised her eyebrows and nodded, "It's not bad." Seeing Imo Xiaoyao's apologetic expression, Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "It's good to have time to go sightseeing. But if you want me to travel the world all day like Big Brother, I can't stand it." Yi Li was not lying. She was not a romantic scholar like Su Qingchen, who was deeply attached to mountains and rivers. Sightseeing was a way for her to relax, not to live a normal life. It was easier for her to live a normal life. In essence, Yili felt that she was a very tacky person. Even if she wanted to travel the world, Yili felt that it should be done when she was at least 40 or 50 years old. Basically, being a special forces soldier was a career that required hard work. So when she was young, she should do the things that young people did. Otherwise, what would she do when she was old? Just stare at each other in a daze? I thought that Lily liked to live a leisurely life. The busy life these past few years isn't what Lily wants, right? Mo Xiaoyao asked. Yili was silent for a moment and said, "We've discussed this before. I thought you already understood what I meant. I don't like to fight for power. It's best to live a peaceful life. But in this world, unless I live in seclusion, it won't be easy to live a happy life, right? Moreover, I'm not alone. Even if it wasn't for you, I would still have a husband and children. If my husband wasn't Prince Ding and my son wasn't Prince Ding's heir, then would he still be as safe and carefree as he is now? He might get bullied by others because of his status, and I can't protect him all the time. In addition, compared to retreating to the backyard without freedom, I prefer to walk freely in the open. If you want something, you naturally have to give something. Compared to the freedom I have now, being a bit busy isn't unacceptable, right?" Mo Xiaoyao looked seriously at Yi Li and said, "No matter what Li Li thinks, I hope that Li doesn't have to worry about anything. As long as it's something that Li wants, there will be someone who will bring the best in the world to Li. But I can't do it." Yi Li helplessly lifted Mo Xiaoyao's face. She saw the sincerity, guilt, helplessness, and grievance in those handsome eyes. She couldn't help but smile and say, "You mean that you want to create a cage made of gold and precious stones to lock me in? Then I'll eat dragon liver and phoenix marrow, wear gold and silver thread, and even use immortal dew to rinse my mouth. Xiaoyao, this isn't what I want. What I want is that no matter where you want to go, no matter how high you want to go, you and I will be able to walk side by side. Do you understand? Anything else?" Mo Xiaoyao looked at her, as if he was waiting for her to ask for more. Li's request was too difficult for many people, but for Mo Xiaoyao, it was too simple. He wanted to give Li the best, everything that she wanted. Even if he didn't have it now, he would get it in the future, and he would steal it for her. Yi Li tilted her head to look at him. After a while, she smiled and said, "Also, if there is a second woman on this road, don't blame me for kicking you down. There will never be a second Li in this world." Mo Xiaoyao said with a soft sigh. There was only one Li, so there would never be a second woman on their road. After comforting a certain someone who was throwing a tantrum, Yi Li added some of Mo Xiaoyao's favorite vegetables and put them in his bowl, indicating that he should eat. The main hall of the inn was not a good place to talk. Fortunately, the inn was open for business, and there were not many people in the main hall. The two of them sat in the corner, and no one noticed their interaction. While eating, the two of them discussed the journey ahead. A large group of people walked in from the entrance of the inn, each of them carrying a weapon. Just by looking at their clothes, one could tell that they were not ordinary people. The innkeeper quickly went up to greet them, and the main hall became lively. Yi Li frowned and said in a low voice, "Why are there so many Jianghu people in this place?" This was only a small, unknown city in Xiling, and it was rare to see Jianghu people here. Not to mention coming in such a large group like this. Mo Xiaoyao muttered to himself, and looked at those people for a while before saying, "Speaking of which, this year seems to be the martial arts convention that is held every 9 years. Martial arts convention? To choose the chief of the martial arts world?" Speaking of the martial arts convention, Yi Li's first impression was to become the chief of the martial arts world. Mo Xiaoyao laughed in a low voice and said, "Yi Li has never liked to pay attention to Jianghu matters. Where did you hear it from? What chief of the martial arts world? The Jianghu is all about the sects and clans. Who would listen to who? Even if he was the world's #1 martial artist, not everyone would listen to him. If the world's #1 martial artist was a loner, then he would not be able to command some small sects and clans, let alone leading a group of heroes. The chief of the martial arts world was just something imagined in those storybooks. I remember now, Prince seemed to have participated in the martial arts convention 18 years ago. So, this so-called convention is a convention for Jianghu people to compete for rankings? Yi Li quickly remembered. Mo Xiaoyao had obtained the title of one of the world's 4 masters at the martial arts convention 18 years ago. At that time, Mo Xiaoyao was only 14 years old. Mo Xiaoyao was only in his teens, but he had already experienced the 3rd martial arts convention. Of course, Mo Xiaoyao did not participate in the 2nd convention for some reason. Is this convention held in Xiling? Is Xiaoyao going? Yi Li smiled and asked, "You didn't participate last time. This time, you might be able to obtain the title of the world's #1 master and go back." Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and smiled. "If Yi Li is interested, then let's go take a look. But forget about the #1 master." The #1 master meant that there would be countless people coming to challenge you and defeat you. Mo Xiaoyao did not think that he had the time to deal with the endless stream of Jianghu masters. If he had the time, he might as well accompany Yi Li to bully Mo Xiaobao. Yi Li smiled and said, "Speaking of which, Prince and Tower Master Ling seem to have an unfinished battle. Do you think we'll run into Tower Master Ling this time?" Mo Xiaoyao frowned. What Yi Li said might really happen. Now that he was healthy and had nothing to do, if he ran into Ling Taihan, he could forget about escaping. Although he also wanted to spar with a master like Ling Taihan, but Ling Taihan might not have the time to pay attention to me, Mo Xiaoyao said with a smile. Yi Li did not understand. Was there a better opponent than Mo Xiaoyao in this world? Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "There might not be a better opponent, but, between an opponent and an enemy, which one do you think Ling Taihan will choose first, Li?" "Enemy?" Yi Li frowned. She counted the number of masters in the Jianghu that she remembered, and said with some confusion, "Ling Taihan and Lei Jinting have a grudge?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "Yi Li, haven't you noticed that Ling Taihan and Lei Jinting are both masters of Xiling? Logically speaking, their relationship should be better. But all these years, Ling Taihan would rather go to the Chu state to spar with masters than spar with Lei Jinting." Yi Li raised her eyebrows. "Is it not because Lei Jinting's identity is special?" "No, it's because once they fight, it will definitely be a fight to the death. Before he has the confidence to kill Lei Jinting, Ling Taihan will not make a move," Mo Xiaoyao said calmly. Chapter 532. "Excuse me, may I have a table with you?" At the door, a scholar in a blue silk robe walked in. He glanced at the hall that was full in the blink of an eye and walked to where Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li were sitting. Yi Li glanced at the lobby. The lobby of the inn wasn't big to begin with. There were only 7 or 8 tables in it, but it was already filled with people. Although there were empty seats, it was indeed a little difficult for such a scholarly person to squeeze in with those valiant and domineering people of the underworld. It was not a big deal. Glancing at Mo Xiaoyao, Yi Li said lightly, "Go ahead." The scholar felt that the man in front of him was not easy to get along with and did not have much hope. Unexpectedly, the woman in plain clothes agreed so easily. He was stunned for a moment and then hurriedly thanked her. "Thank you, Mississippi." The corner of Yi Li's mouth twitched. She could clearly feel the rising chill of the man beside her. She looked up at the scholar and said, "This is my husband." The scholar looked even more surprised. Yi Li was dressed in plain clothes, and her hair was not tied into a bun like a married woman. Her hair was casually tied up with a silver ribbon. Although she looked like she was 16 or 17 years old, there were many women in West Hill who were still unmarried at 17 years old. He thought that they were a pair of brother and sister traveling together. He did not expect them to be a couple. "I'm really sorry, madam. What's your name?" Mo Xiaoyao looked up at him and frowned slightly. After a while, he said lightly, "Yi." In just a moment, the awkwardness and guilt on the scholar's face had completely disappeared. He looked at the two of them as if they were old friends who had known each other for many years. Brother Yi and Madam are also here to participate in this year's martial arts assembly? Mo Xiaoyao said calmly, it's not really a participation. We're just here to have fun. The scholar clapped his hands and smiled, that's great. I also want to have fun. Why don't we go together? That's right. I am Ren Qining. This time, Yili did not answer. She was indeed not familiar with Jianghu. Other than a few truly famous masters, she did not know of any other strange people. But at least he could see that Ren Qining was definitely not an ordinary scholar. Xiling was different from the Dechu state. Xiling was not a place filled with Confucian scholars. It was strange for a scholar to appear in such a place. Moreover, he had dragged them to the martial arts convention to join in the fun. Mo Xiaoyao put down his chopsticks and saw that Yili had finished eating. He stood up and pulled Yili away. He said indifferently, no need. We don't like to be disturbed by outsiders. He didn't care about Ren Qining's expression behind him and pulled Yili upstairs to rest. Xiaoyao. In the afternoon, in the inn, Yili sat by the half-open window and read a travel book. The warm sunlight shone on her body, making her feel lazy and not want to move. Being hugged from behind, Yili put down her book and looked sideways at the man behind her. Mo Xiaoyao stood behind Yili and leisurely looked at the people coming and going on the street below. Yili thought for a moment and asked, that Ren Qining is probably not an ordinary person. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and gently tidied up the messy hair by her ear. He said softly, he is indeed not simple. But don't worry. There are always strange people in Jianghu. Yili should just go and watch the fun. Yili asked curiously, how is Ren Qining's martial arts? Yili could only see that Ren Qining was not a weak scholar without the strength to truss a chicken, but she could not see the depth of his martial arts. This proved that Ren Qining was better than her in terms of martial arts. Mo Xiaoyao frowned. He thought for a moment and said, in Jianghu, he can at least be ranked in the top 10. Maybe even the top 5. I can't see which family he is from. In the end, Mo Xiaoyao was not a person of Jianghu. When Mo Xiaoyao was 14 years old, he shocked the world with his sword and became one of the 4 masters. After that, he spent most of his time and energy on the battlefield. He only knew the general situation of Jianghu. Yili helplessly smiled bitterly and said, what good luck. Just going out for a walk and we can meet such an expert. Letting Yili lean on his body, Mo Xiaoyao looked at her and said with a smile, don't mind him. If we ruin the fun for such a small matter, we might as well not go to the martial arts convention. You're not afraid that someone else will take the title of the 4 masters? Yili asked with a smile. Mo Xiaoyao disdainfully snorted and said, even if the title of the top 10 masters is taken by someone else, it doesn't change the fact that I's martial arts are higher than theirs. Not to mention, how many people in this world need I to personally take care of them? Whether I am an expert or not is just a matter of playing around when I was young. Yili leaned on his chest and sighed. Her heart was filled with sorrow and amusement. The title of an expert that the people of Jianghu scrambled for was nothing more than a joke in Mo Xiaoyao's eyes. She did not know what kind of expression those martial arts experts would have if they knew. I haven't seen the martial arts convention yet. Let's go see what it's like. Yili turned around and said. Okay, we'll go wherever Li wants to go. Mo Xiaoyao replied. The martial arts convention naturally would not be held in this unknown small town. However, the location was not too far from this small town. It was 200 li away from the small town. It was the 4th largest city in Xiling and Cheng. It was 10 li away from Murong Manor. The next morning, Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao prepared to leave for Encheng. As soon as they went downstairs, they saw Ren Qining, who was also preparing to pay the bill and leave. Unlike Mo Xiaoyao's indifference, Ren Qining was very happy to see the two of them. Yi, Madam Yi, what a coincidence. Are the two of you also preparing to leave? Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yili to pay the bill and walked out. Being so brazenly ignored, no matter how elegant Ren Qining was, he couldn't help but stiffen. However, he still caught up. Yi, Madam Yi. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, Mo Xiaoyao turned around and looked at him for a while before saying, Young Master Ren, it's rare for me and my wife to go out on a leisurely trip. If you disturb other couples, you'll be kicked by the horse. As a result, Ren Qining, who was stunned, could only look on helplessly as Mo Xiaoyao hugged Yili and mounted the horse and left. He couldn't recover for a long time. After leaving the small town, Yili couldn't help but laugh when she thought of Ren Qining, who was left behind and looked as if he had swallowed a fly. Mo Xiaoyao leaned on Yili's shoulder. While casually controlling the speed and direction of the horse, he laughed softly and said, Why are you laughing so happily, Madam Li? Yili shook her head repeatedly. Mo Xiaoyao naturally knew why she was laughing and didn't care. He said faintly, I'm afraid that Ren Qining's scheme isn't small. No matter why he insisted on going with us, we'll always feel uncomfortable with him following us. Yili nodded. She also didn't have any intention of going with others. What kind of place is Murong Manor? A famous Jianghu family. Murong Manor was indeed a place that often appeared in wuxia novels. Every time, it was something like Jianghu's 8 great aristocratic families and so on. If she knew that she was going to get involved in Jianghu, she would have read all the reports about Jianghu from the dark department. Chapter 533. Mo Xiaoyao said, The Murong Manor is not a famous family in Jianghu. It is the richest family in the world. Ha! Yili was a bit surprised. The richest family in the world? Yili had seen rich people before. Feng Jiao's Feng family was one of the 4 richest families in Dechu State, but they did not dare to call themselves the richest family in the world. Then how rich was the Murong family? How does it compare to the Feng family? Mo Xiaoyao said, even 5 Feng families may not be able to compare to the Murong family's wealth. Even though she was mentally prepared, Yili was still a bit shocked. Mo Xiaoyao calmly explained, the Murong family and the Su family are the same. They are both famous families that have been around for hundreds of years. However, they are different from the Su family. The Su family is a scholarly family, while the Murong family is a business family. Therefore, their status has always been inferior to the Su family. When Xiling and the Dechu state were still one, the Murong family was already the richest family in the world. Rumor has it that they have 3 mysterious gold veins in their hands. For many years, whether it was the Emperor Xiling's family or even the Dechu state's southern Zhao and northern tribes, they all wanted to obtain these veins, but no one succeeded. Rich enough to rival a country. For such a Murong family to be able to establish themselves in Xiling for so long, they must have something to rely on. Yili said. Although the status of merchants was the lowest among scholars, farmers, businessmen. However, when it came to food, clothing, housing, wealth, oil, and salt, how could it be separated from business? Since ancient times, those who were truly rich enough to rival a country did not have a good ending. Mo Xiaoyao said, when Xiling was founded, the Murong family helped. After Xiling was established, the Murong family naturally received great benefits. Xiling's business has always been less prosperous than the Dechu state. One of the reasons is that the Murong family controls nearly 60% of Xiling's shops. Yili nodded. One family could control 60% of a country's business. Under such a monopoly, it was no wonder that Xiling's business was not doing well. If business wasn't easy to do, it would naturally be difficult for business to develop. After thinking for a bit, Yili smiled and said, So you're saying that the Emperor of Xiling's family has long disliked the Murong family? Mo Xiaoyao nodded in agreement and smiled, That's right. But even so, the Emperor of Xiling doesn't dare to rashly attack the Murong family. Firstly, the Murong family was a businessman, unlike the Prince Ding mansion. If they were forced into a corner, no matter which country they sided with, the blow to West Hill would be fatal. In addition, it was said that the Morong family had an extremely powerful expert. Unfortunately, no one has ever seen this expert before. If we provoke him and he decides to fight to the death, regardless of whether it's the Emperor of Xiling or Genom of Gojoseon, both of them only have one life. Even Genom of Gojoseon isn't a match for him. Yi Li was shocked. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and looked at her with a smile. Although the Jianghu martial arts competitions have created the titles of the four great experts, the true experts of this world all live in seclusion. There are also many experts of the older generation who have already retired into the mountains and forests. But if they truly fight, not to mention martial arts, just based on experience, how can the younger generation compare to them? The Morong family is the wealthiest in the world, but for so many years, no one has ever dared to cause trouble or steal anything from the Morong family. Therefore, the saying that there is an expert overseeing the family is somewhat credible. Is the prince very interested in that mysterious expert? Yi Li asked when she saw that Mo Xiaoyao's eyes were brighter than usual. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, I can't say if I'm interested or not. If I really meet him, I'll naturally go all out. If I don't meet him, I won't have any regrets. If the young Mo Xiaoyao knew that there was such a mysterious expert, he would definitely go and challenge him. But the current Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't. He is the ruler of the Northwest, responsible for the safety of hundreds of thousands of Mahist army and the people of the Northwest. He is Yi Li's husband and Mo Xiaobao's father. He has to protect their safety and give them a stable and peaceful home. If he really has no choice but to meet that mysterious expert, he can only go all out and fight. If there isn't, then it's not worth it to look for trouble. He is different from Ling Taihan, who wholeheartedly pursues martial arts. What kind of people does the Morong family have? I haven't heard of anyone with the surname Morong in the Western tomb. Even if she doesn't understand Jianghu, Yi Li still has a certain understanding of the Northwest. It's reasonable to say that with the Morong family's reputation, she shouldn't have missed it. Mo Xiaoyao smiled indifferently and said, the peak of prosperity is bound to decline. The Morong family has been prosperous for hundreds of years and doesn't have the Su family to hide their strength and bide their time. Naturally, they also have to pay some price. The previous generation's Morong families had originally had 3 sons and 4 daughters. One of the sons and 1 daughter died when they reached adulthood. Of the 2 sons who survived, the more talented one was called Morong Hui. But when he was 23 years old, he died inexplicably. There was another son who was sick since childhood and died before he was 30 years old. He left behind a son and a daughter. Unfortunately, the son was born an idiot. The Morong family's head was worried that the brothers of the side branches would steal his grandson's property and status, so he ruthlessly killed all the brothers and descendants of the side branches. Who knew that the idiot fell into the pond and died when he was 9 years old? Because of this matter, the Morong family's head's vitality was greatly damaged. It is said that he hasn't seen outsiders for many years. It's natural that Yi Li doesn't know. Yi Li's heart moved and asked, doesn't that mean that in the future, the Morong family's property will belong to the only remaining Miss Morong? How old is that Miss Morong this year? Mo Xiaoyao was startled. He thought for a moment and said, it is said that the Morong family's head's granddaughter was 3 years younger than the idiot who died prematurely. She should be 17 or 18 years old this year. Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled. She turned her head to look at Mo Xiaoyao and said with a smile, I don't know why do I feel that this martial arts convention has something to do with that Miss Morong? Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and leaned against Yi Li's forehead. He laughed in a low voice, even if it has something to do with her, it has nothing to do with us. What Yi Li says, isn't that right? Yi Li blinked her eyes and said, the Morong family's wealth is comparable to that of a country. Prince, are you really not moved? Mo Xiaoyao helplessly sighed and said, there is no other way. Who told I to marry a princess who, although not as rich as a country, is more precious than a mountain of gold and the Milky Way? Therefore, I don't have the life to touch the Morong family's wealth. Yi Li narrowed her eyes and looked at him. She wanted to make an angry appearance, but she couldn't help but want to laugh. Prince, are you very regretful? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. Yi Li and gold cannot have both. I will only give up gold and marry Yi Li. According to what Yi Li said, if it is really like this, then this year's martial arts convention will be very lively. Let's quickly go and see the excitement. But, if the Murong family really wants to choose a husband for their granddaughter, why would they choose the martial arts convention? Most influential and famous people wouldn't go there, right? Could it be that the Murong family only wants to choose a person with strong martial arts? Who knows? Won't we know once we go and see? The wild horse caught from Nanzhao was not inferior to a precious treasure horse. It only took them half a day to travel 200 li. Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li directly entered An City. An City was the fourth largest city in Xiling. The two naturally did not have to suffer and found the best inn in the city to stay. This year's martial arts convention was indeed different from the previous ones. Although it was not time yet, the various inns in the city were already full of people. Not only were there Jianghu people, there were also many rich merchants and even influential people. The best rooms in the inn that Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao stayed in were all full. The two of them could only stay in the second-rate earth room. Chapter 534. Originally, with Mo Xiaoyao's status, he didn't need to squeeze into an inn with other people. Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao had been sightseeing for more than a month, and they had only taken remote paths, so they didn't know that the Mu Rong family had already sent out invitations to all the heroes in the world to participate in the martial arts convention. As Prince Ding, Mo Xiaoyao was naturally among them, and the invitations were sent to Li City in the northwest. Everyone who received the invitations had their accommodations arranged by the Mu Rong family. For this reason, the Mu Rong family had specially set aside a courtyard for these heroes to temporarily stay in. Mo Xiaoyao had no intention of participating in this martial arts convention, so he naturally wouldn't reveal his identity and go to the Mu Rong family. He could only bring Yi Li to stay in an inn. An City's Qing Yuan Inn was one of the best inns in the entire An City. Those who could stay here were naturally rich and powerful, and there were also some outstanding disciples of famous sects in Jianghu. Yi Li curiously looked at the well-dressed travelers coming and going. She tilted her head and asked Mo Xiaoyao, who was leisurely drinking tea, "Is every martial arts convention this formal?" Mo Xiaoyao curled his lips and said, "How is that possible? Most of the time, it's just a few experts from the previous convention who have arranged a place to compete. Once the news is released, the people of Jianghu will naturally go and join in the fun. The convention I went to was an exception. Ling Taihan went to challenge Genom of Gojoseon. I just happened to be playing nearby and went to join in the fun. I accidentally got into a fight. Speaking of which, the only person who actually participated in that convention was Mu Qingcang. The so-called martial arts convention was actually so casual." Yi Li felt a bit disillusioned. However, this also proved how attractive the Mu Rong family was to the world. Downstairs, a few young and handsome youths disagreed and started fighting. Downstairs was suddenly in chaos. Yi Li coldly looked at the people below as they fought back and forth, wanting to kill each other. She didn't have the slightest intention of interfering. Not long after, the victor was decided. The loser's hand strength was severed, and he would never be able to practice the sword again. The winner was naturally proud of himself. He laughed contemptuously and said, "You should take a look at yourself. How dare you covet Miss Murong?" His words immediately made it clear that these people were not here for the so-called martial arts assembly, but for Lady Murong, or rather, for the Murong family. Before he could finish being complacent, a hidden weapon shot out of nowhere and hit his chest. The youth who was still complacent a moment ago immediately fell to the ground. Who would release such an idiot to harm others and themselves? Yi Li frowned and said softly. The fight below was started by the youth who had been hit by the hidden weapon. He had crippled the other's hand, but he had also lost his life. That is son Jianhui, the eldest son of the famous Sun family of Dechu State. A refined and smiling voice sounded from behind. Yili turned around and saw Ren Qining smiling as he stood at the top of the stairs looking at the two people through the window. Meeting Ren Qining again at the same inn, Yili wasn't too surprised. However, this also proved that this young Master Ren wasn't as harmless as he appeared to be. His family background was definitely not ordinary. However, this wasn't enough to make Mo Xiaoyao and Yili take him seriously. To put it bluntly, in this world, other than the imperial family of each country, no one else had the qualifications to make Mo Xiaoyao pay attention to them. Therefore, when he saw Ren Qining, Mo Xiaoyao's attitude was still cold and distant. Young Master Ren was a bit gloomy about this. He had always been high and mighty since he was young. In addition, his warm and gentle appearance made people unconsciously feel close to him. Who would have thought that there would be such a stubborn person? If it wasn't too rude, Ren Qining would have asked Mo Xiaoyao if he had offended him in any way. Yi, are you also here to participate in the martial arts convention? Ren Qining didn't seem to notice Mo Xiaoyao's cold attitude and laughed loudly. His voice wasn't soft, so when he said this, most of the people on the second floor focused their attention on Mo Xiaoyao. Their eyes were filled with vigilance and hostility. After all, not to mention Mo Xiaoyao's hidden identity and martial arts. Just his handsome appearance alone was enough to make most men hostile to him. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyelids, as if he didn't notice the hostile gazes of the crowd. He smiled faintly, we just happened to pass by. My wife wanted to join in the fun. But, with young Master Ren's status, you should be staying in the Murong family's courtyard. Why are you also here at the inn? Hearing this, the hostility in the crowd immediately disappeared. Wasn't it true? There was a beautiful and elegant woman sitting next to this handsome young master. Although she wasn't as rich as the Murong family, this woman was still beautiful and graceful. Her temperament was outstanding, and it was obvious that she came from a scholarly family. The Murong family's young miss might not be able to surpass this woman in terms of appearance and temperament. Maybe this young master only liked beauties and not money. On the other hand, the young master wearing the blue silk robe was also outstanding. It was obvious that he came from an extraordinary background. Most importantly, he was still single. Ren Qining's eyes flashed and he smiled, Brother Yi is joking. With my status, how could I be qualified to stay in the Murong family's courtyard? I'm just here to join in the fun like Brother Yi. Is it convenient for me to sit with you? Mo Xiaoyao declined to comment. Ren Qining took it as an agreement and sat down across from the two. As they drank tea, Mo Xiaoyao didn't want to talk to Ren Qining. The atmosphere at the table was a bit cold. Yili picked up the teacup and took a sip. She casually said, the martial arts convention this time is a bit strange. Wasn't it said that the previous martial arts conventions were set by the experts from the previous convention? Could it be that the experts chose the Murong family's martial arts competition this time? Generally, the experts would choose a more remote and famous mountain. It was said that the most powerful person chose the peak of the snowy mountain in the north of the western tomb. That time, the number of participants was the least because many people couldn't even reach the peak of the snowy mountain. Ren Qining smiled and said, Madam, do you know who the top 4 experts in Jianghu are? Yili nodded and said, I've heard a little about them. Ren Qining smiled and said, speaking of which, these 4 aren't experts from the previous convention. They are experts from the convention before that. In fact, the previous martial arts convention couldn't be held at all. Yili asked curiously, what do you mean? Ren Qining said, during the previous martial arts convention, Prince Ding couldn't participate because of his injury. Pavilion Master Ling of the Yanwang Chamber also couldn't participate because of Prince Ding's absence. The Genom King of Gojoseon of Western Tomb was busy with state affairs, so Mu Qingsong was the only expert in that convention. However, none of the people who went to challenge Mu Qingsong could beat him or even tie with him. The martial arts convention, which was supposed to last 3 days, ended in half a day. Yili glanced at Imo Xiaoyao secretly and smiled. There's such a thing. Ren Qining sighed and said, isn't that so? Seriously speaking, the ranking of the experts in Jianghu hasn't changed for 18 years. Naturally, there are many rising stars who can't help but want to try their skills. What does this have to do with the Murong family? Yili raised her eyebrows and asked. The Murong family was a merchant family and had nothing to do with the people of Jianghu. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.